Chapter 303. Qin Shao. Jianqin yelled out in grief and indignation. He left behind an afterimage as he charged toward the three of them with lightning-like speed. At the same time, a tremendous killing intent radiated from his body. It was frightening as it soared into the sky. The yellow-clothed woman, standing beside Jianqin, had a golden bow on her back. She stared at Jianqin in surprise as he disappeared into the distance. This was the first time she had seen Jianqin lose his composure like this in the days that she had spent with Jianqin. His emotions fluctuated so greatly. Afterwards, he took small steps and walked down the hill at a steady pace. Jianqin's yell was obviously heard by the three of them. The two blood-soaked people immediately roused their spirits. They never thought that they would actually encounter someone who knew the young master of the Tianqin clan at such a crucial moment. The two of them, who were already at the end of their rope, immediately lit up with joy as if they had found a life-saving straw. When they looked over with joy, they became stunned. Their faces darkened and their joy from before completely vanished. The two of them knew Jianqin. He was a friend that the young master of the Tianqin clan, Qin Shao, had made outside. Although his talent was quite good, reaching the strength of a great Saint Master at such a young age, their opponent was an Earth Saint Master, and an extremely powerful one with wind-attributed Saint Force. Even when the two of them worked together, they could only retreat, let alone Jianqin, who was only a great Saint Master. At this moment, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master also discovered Jianqin's arrival. However, when he saw Jianqin's young and handsome face, his face suddenly changed. He could not help but think of what had happened half a month ago. A deep fear suddenly appeared in the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master's heart. He no longer had the courage to continue fighting. I'll let you go for now. The wind-attributed Earth Saint Master threw out these harsh words. His face was filled with unwillingness as he quickly fled into the distance. After the middle-aged man left, one of the blood-soaked people finally fainted because he was heavily injured and had overused a Saint Force. The other person was not much better off. He sat on the ground with a withered expression. Qin Shao, how are you? Wake up! An urgent call rang out from the side. Jianqin had already arrived in front of Qin Shao. He held Qin Shao's head as he urgently called out. His voice was filled with indescribable anxiety. Qin Shao's injuries were extremely heavy. Not only was he covered in blood, but the surrounding grass was also covered in blood as well. 2 wounds on his body. His waist, which was as thick as a bucket, had been cut in half. Only half of his waist, leaving only half of his lower body. The other wound was on his chest. Organs. Not a single part of his body. Was half of his waist. Where was half of his waist? Waist was Qin Shao. Quick, use your bow to shoot him down. Don't let him escape. Jianqin's face was filled with killing intent. He pointed at the azure figure that had already escaped 2 kilometers away and was about to disappear into the mountains as he yelled at the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman, who was walking over unhurriedly originally, wanted to use the sun-moon bow to kill the person who had escaped. However, when she heard Jianqin's commanding tone, she immediately frowned and stopped. She withdrew her bow and coldly said, "I'm not going to shoot. Why should I listen to you?" Bang! Jianqin heavily smashed his fist into the ground, creating a half-meter deep crater in the soft ground. His bloodshot eyes stared at the girl in yellow with an extremely sharp gaze. His intense killing intent was not concealed at all. This time, Jianqin was truly enraged. Being stared at by Jianqin like a bloodthirsty beast, the yellow-clothed woman's heart violently trembled. She immediately stopped in her tracks and felt an inexplicable sense of sorrow. At this moment, she suddenly regretted not killing the person who had escaped. When she changed her mind, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had already crossed the mountain and disappeared. Jianqin. Just when Jianqin was about to use his radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Shao, an almost inaudible voice suddenly entered Jianshan's ears. Qin Zhao's tightly shut eyes opened a tiny slit. His lips trembled slightly as he mumbled something. Qin Zhao, hang in there. I'll help you recover very soon. With that, Jianshan was about to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Zhao. Qin Zhao was currently in an extremely dangerous situation. His life was hanging by a thread and he could die at any time. Jianshan. Qin Zhao could only open his eyes a tiny slit. He raised his right hand with great difficulty and grabbed Jianshan's hand. He slowly placed it on his waist and stammered, "Help! Help me take a small green bottle out of my space belt on my waist belt, a small green bottle out." Qin Zhao's voice was weak. He could not even make a sound towards the end. All he could do was sigh. With that, his head tilted to the side and he fainted. Jianshan still heard Qin Zhao's words clearly. He immediately and carefully removed Qin Zhao's space belt, afraid that he would touch his wounds. Afterwards, he rummaged through it in a hurry. In the end, he found 3 small green jade bottles on a wooden shelf. Jianshan took out the 3 jade bottles before opening all 3 of them. He checked the contents of the bottles. Every single bottle contained a thumb-sized pill that shone with a weak white light. This is... Jianshan was shocked. He could clearly sense that although the 3 pills were just powder on the surface, they were filled with pure Radiant Saint Force. Jianshan was a Radiant Saint Master himself, so he understood the effects of Radiant Saint Force extremely well. He immediately poured a pill out of the bottle and fed it to Qin Zhao. With the ingestion of the pill, Qin Zhao's complexion rapidly improved. Although the tiny amount of Radiant Saint Force in the pill was not enough to heal his wounds, it was enough to keep his life. However, he did not wake up. After Qin Zhao's wounds stabilized, Jianshan let out a huge sigh of relief. Only now did he look at the 2 bloodied men. Jianshan had seen the 2 of them before. One of them was the Zither Master. According to Qin Zhao, the Zither Master was an infant that his grandfather had brought back. She had grown up in the Tianqin clan and was loyal to the clan. She was still unconscious right now. The other person was not a member of the Tianqin clan. Instead, he was one of the 3 people who had come to Mercenary City with Tianzhou through the Space Gate. He was Tianzhou's brother who had gone through thick and thin with him. Currently, he was also pale-faced as he sat on the ground powerlessly. He ate medicine to heal his wounds silently. 3 silhouettes appeared on a high slope in the distance and rapidly approached this place. The arrival of the 3 people immediately raised everyone's guard. "Brother!" Suddenly, a voice mixed with joy came from the side. The person who was sitting at the side and eating healing medicine looked at the 3 people who were walking over with excitement. Then, he struggled to get up from the ground. The 3 people were actually Tianzhou and the other 2 people who had been brought over by Tianzhou from the Tianqin clan. "Brother! Brother! Brother!" Tianzhou and the other 2 quickly recognized the person who was covered in blood. They cried out in alarm and quickly ran over. "Fourth brother, what happened to you? Who hurt you like this? Fourth brother, hurry up and tell me, which bastard beat you up like this?" The other 2 were infuriated when they saw how their brother was covered in blood. Tianzhou's complexion was very ugly as well. The 3 of them glanced around the area. Obviously, they discovered the unconscious Tianzhou and the young master of the Qin family. They also noticed Jianshan and the yellow-clothed woman behind him. "Who are you?" One of them glared at the yellow-clothed woman and angrily called out. Jianshan had come with them, so they all recognized Jianshan. They only did not recognize the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman glanced at them in disdain before turning her head to the side in a haughty manner. She could not even be bothered to look at them, let alone say anything. Her disdain was evident. The yellow-clothed woman's attitude made the man's face turn cold. He yelled out again, "Girl, I'm asking you a question. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me?" The yellow-clothed woman's face sank when she heard that. Killing intent filled her eyes as she stared at the man. She growled, "If you say another word, I'll kill you immediately." If it were not for the fact that Jianqin was standing to the side and she guessed that Jianqin probably knew them, the yellow-clothed woman would have attacked them long ago. After all, the three of them were Earth Saint Masters and possessed quite a few battle medallions. "You!" The man was infuriated. His saint force surged as a curved blade appeared in his hand. He roared, "You must be tired of living. Let me teach you a lesson right now." He was about to charge forward when he finished speaking. "Sai, second brother, you really don't know how to be romantic. How can you even lay your hands on such a pretty girl?" An ugly person standing beside Zhou Tian extended his hand to stop his second brother, who had already drawn his saint weapon. He glanced at the yellow-clothed woman with a perverted gaze. The second brother was slightly surprised when he heard that, but he soon returned to his senses. He snickered. "Third brother, you're still the quick-witted one. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl." He then snickered at the yellow-clothed woman. "Little beauty, I've changed my mind now. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl like you. Why don't you accompany us for a bit first? If we're satisfied with your service, we'll naturally let you go." The yellow-clothed woman's face was frosty and extremely gloomy. Jianqin's face sank slightly when he heard that. Although he had a great opinion of the yellow-clothed woman because of what had happened earlier, he really could not stand the actions of these two people. Moreover, he was in the same boat as the yellow-clothed woman, no matter what. Jianqin clearly did not have a good impression of Zhou Tian and the others. Zhou Tian had made things difficult for Jianqin quite a bit in the Tianqin clan before. "If you don't want to die, the two of you better watch your mouths." Jianqin slowly stood up and glared at them coldly as he growled, "Fuck, kid, we're talking to the little beauty. What right do you have to interfere? Do you want to die?" The second brother glared at Jianqin and roared. His face was filled with killing intent. Although Jianqin was on good terms with the first young master of the Tianqin clan, Qin Shao, and Tianzhou was also a part of the Tianqin clan, as Tianzhou's brothers. They knew that Tianzhou hated Jianqin very much. Tianzhou's face sank as well. His gaze towards Jianqin was filled with intense killing intent. Back in the Tianqin clan, Tianzhou had a great opinion of Jianqin and had argued with him. If the patriarch of the Tianqin clan had not arrived in time to stop the two of them, he would have attacked Jianqin long ago. On the way to Mercenary City, Tianzhou had wanted to attack Jianqin more than once, but he had held himself back because of the Great Elder. Now that such a great opportunity had presented itself before him, he obviously would not miss it. Tianzhou glanced at the bloodied fourth brother. The fourth brother quickly understood what Zhou Tian was trying to say. He immediately pointed at Jianqin and yelled, "Big brother, second brother, third brother, we were injured by this brat. This brat is cruel and unscrupulous. He wanted to kill Qin Shao from the Tianqin clan. Me and another brother from the Tianqin clan were caught off guard and were heavily injured by his sneak attack. If you hadn't arrived in time, I probably wouldn't have been able to see you again." Little Four said with tears and snot. He was in an extremely miserable state. Tianzhou's face was extremely sunken. He stared at Jianqin coldly and said, "Brat, to think that my big brother was so polite to you, treating you as an honored guest. Yet you actually did such a heartless thing. Today, Tianzhou, will not forgive you. Third brother, go capture the murderer who wanted to kill my nephew Qin Shao." In Tianzhou's eyes, Jianqin was only a great saint master. He did not take him seriously at all, so he would not lower himself to personally take action. "Yes, big brother." The third brother immediately responded. He walked towards Jianqin with a sneer. He did not even take out his own saint weapon. He did not take this brat, who was only a great saint master, seriously at all. A cold light flickered through Jianqin's eyes. He did not try to explain himself because it was completely unnecessary. "Stop!" Suddenly, a rather weak voice rang out. The bloodied Qin Jew had awoken at some point in time. He crawled up from the ground with difficulty and weakly said, "You've misunderstood. We were injured by an extremely powerful Earth Saint Master. It has nothing to do with this young man." Tian Zhou's expression changed slightly. He glanced at the Qin Jew and yelled, "Nonsense. Qin Jew, you must be muddle-headed. You, fourth brother, and nephew Qin Shao were clearly injured by this brat. There was no one else." Hearing this, the Qin Jew's eyes flickered, but he did not make a sound. He had just woken up and did not hear what Tian Zhou had said, so he was not clear about the situation. But now, he could tell that Zhou Tian was sincerely trying to make things difficult for Jianchen. He was currently heavily injured and could not even take care of himself. Even if he wanted to stop this, he did not have the strength to do so. At this time, the third brother had already arrived in front of Jianchen. He stared at Jianchen's handsome face with a cold smile. He directly reached out his hand to grab Jianchen's shoulder. The strength of his hand was so great that if a normal great Saint Master was caught by this hand, their bones would have been crushed. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Before the third brother could react, the light wind sword's sharp edge was already on his neck. This sudden turn of events caused the third brother to turn pale with fright. His hand that was about to grab Jianchen's shoulder also froze in midair. He could neither advance nor retreat. "Why were you?" The third brother was tongue-tied as he stared at the sword that was already on his neck. He was so shocked that he could not say anything. A great Saint Master had actually placed a weapon on his neck without him noticing. This caused the third brother, who was only an Earth Saint Master, to be extremely shocked. He found it hard to accept this fact. "If you continue to distort the truth, then don't blame me for being impolite," Jianchen coldly said as he looked at Zhou Tian and the others. Being threatened by a junior caused Tian Zhou to feel extremely embarrassed. He yelled out, "Go, kill him and save the third brother." As he said that, a large, fiery red sword appeared in Tian Zhou's hand. He raised it and charged at Jianchen. The second brother also took out his own saint weapon and charged at Jianchen with Tian Zhou. At the same time, the third brother's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. Taking advantage of the fact that Jianchen's attention was on the other two, he clawed at Jianchen's throat with lightning speed. Jianchen coldly snorted as a disdainful sneer appeared on his face. Following that, the light wind sword on the third brother's neck suddenly sliced off. The third brother's head was immediately separated from his neck, causing blood to spurt out like a fountain. Very quickly, the ground was dyed red with blood. "Third brother! Third brother! Third brother!" The eyes of the four people on Tian Zhou were about to pop out of their sockets as they cried out in grief. "You bastard! If I don't kill you today, I'm not a man. Avenge the third brother!" Tian Zhou and the others' faces were filled with killing intent. Their eyes burned with rage, as if they wanted nothing more than to cut Jianchen into pieces. "Search!" Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out. A golden streak of light shot out from behind Jianchen, piercing through the second brother's chest with lightning speed. A fist-sized hole appeared where his heart should have been. His heart had already vanished. The golden light didn't slow down in the slightest after piercing through the second brother's chest. Instead, it continued to shoot backward until it finally disappeared into a mountain several hundred meters away, leaving behind a bottomless hole. Jianchen turned around to see the yellow-clothed girl behind him with a frosty expression. At this moment, she was holding the golden sun-moon bow, still in the posture of shooting an arrow. The second brother had previously insulted her. With the yellow-clothed girl's personality, she naturally wouldn't let him off. If it wasn't for the fact that the third brother's head had already been cut off by Jianchen, the yellow-clothed girl would have already shot the third brother to death. The second brother's eyes were wide open as he stared at the yellow-clothed girl with disbelief. He didn't think that a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old would have such terrifying battle strength. The speed of the golden arrow was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Boom! The second brother's body collapsed. He had been killed by a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old. He died with a grievance. Seeing the fate of the second brother, Tianzhou's expression changed drastically. He immediately paled. Whether it was Genshin's strength or the yellow-clothed girl's, they had both exceeded his expectations. The two Earth Saint Masters who were similar in strength to him had actually been slain in a single clash. In particular, the golden arrow that the yellow-clothed girl had shot out filled Tianzhou with dread. If that arrow had been shot at him, it would have been impossible for him to dodge at such a close distance. He would have ended up the same as the second brother. Tianzhou's charge toward Genshin immediately came to a halt. The current situation had completely exceeded his expectations, leaving him in a dilemma. Genshin coldly stared at the pale-faced Tianzhou and mocked. "Didn't you say you wanted to kill me? Why aren't you doing it now?" Hearing this, Tianzhou's expression immediately became ugly. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Genshin and the yellow-clothed girl. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Brat, Tianzhou, will not forget what happened today." With that, Tianzhou's body moved, and he immediately fled into the distance. The yellow-clothed girl immediately drew her bow and was about to shoot down Tianzhou, when at this moment, Genshin left behind an afterimage as he chased after Tianzhou at a speed even faster than him. As he chased after Tianzhou, Genshin's light wind sword danced as streaks of sharp sword chi shot toward Tianzhou. Sensing that something was wrong behind him, Tianzhou immediately began to dodge. At the same time, the huge sword in his hand was filled with fire-attributed Saint Force as it shattered the sword chi that he could not dodge. Because of this delay, Tianzhou's speed slowed down and Genshin caught up to him very quickly. Genshin's light wind sword immediately stabbed out mercilessly. With his escape blocked, Tianzhou had no choice but to fight with Genshin. As the fire-attributed Saint Force in his body erupted, the surrounding air rapidly rose and the grass on the ground quickly withered. With a roar, Tianzhou's huge sword was covered in raging flames as it heavily slashed toward Genshin. Genshin was not afraid at all as the light wind sword that was only 2 fingers thick collided with the huge sword. Afterwards, Genshin's arm shook and the light wind sword fiercely slapped against the huge sword. The huge sword rippled to the side as the light wind sword mercilessly pierced through Tianzhou's chest. Blood dripped from the tip of the sword as it pierced through his back. You actually have the strength of an Earth Saint Master. How is this possible?" Only now did Tianzhou come to a realization. The Genshin that he had never placed in his eyes was actually not a great Saint Master, but an Earth Saint Master. No wonder you were able to kill third brother so easily. No wonder you were able to catch up to my speed. Tianzhou's face was ashen as he felt a deep sense of regret. If he had known earlier that Genshin was already an Earth Saint Master, he would never have provoked him. Chapter 304. Tianzhou's eyes twinkled as he stared at Genshin. "You want to kill me?" Genshin sneered. "You brought this upon yourself. I have no enmity with you. It was you who tried to make things difficult for me time and time again. You even tried to distort the truth and wanted to kill me. You can't blame me for this." As he spoke, Genshin slowly pulled out the light wind sword from Tianzhou's chest. As the sword was pulled out, blood began to flow from Tianzhou's wound like a fountain. Genshin's sword had only pierced through Zhou Tian's chest. It was still 2 inches away from his heart, so even though the sword had pierced through his chest, it wasn't fatal to an expert like Zhou Tian. Knowing that Genshin was determined to kill him, Tianzhou threw caution to the wind. His face suddenly became serious as he angrily said, "You want to kill me? I'll make you pay a heavy price." The huge sword in Tian Zhou's hand suddenly began to emit a scorching light. A layer of roaring flames began to burn on the surface of the sword. The surging heat caused the surrounding air to rapidly rise. Some of the tender grass on the ground began to wither at a visible rate. "Go die!" Tian Zhou suddenly became crazy. The huge sword turned into a fiery red light as it slashed towards Genshin's head with lightning speed. He knew that with the strange longbow and the yellow-clothed woman beside him, there was no hope for him to escape. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well drag someone down with him. Even if he couldn't drag someone down with him, he definitely wouldn't let Genshin have an easy time. There was only a month left until the end of the elimination round. This period of time was the most intense. If Genshin were to be injured at this time, then even if he was an Earth Saint Master, he might not be able to leave this place safely. As the sword slashed out, a sliver of pressure filled the air, heavily pressing down on Genshin. It made Genshin feel as if he was in a quagmire. It was extremely uncomfortable, and his movements were greatly hindered. Tian Zhou's seemingly ordinary sword strike carried the might of a battle technique. Genshin revealed a mocking smile. He had seen many battle techniques, including those that were even more powerful than Tian Zhou's tornado-shaped battle technique. He didn't think much of it at all. Unless he had no other choice, Genshin would not be stupid enough to take the initiative to meet force with force. He was not a strength-type warrior at all. Genshin's feet slid forward, barely dodging Zhou Tian's giant sword. His light wind sword was as fast as lightning as it pierced towards Tian Zhou's throat. By the time Tian Zhou regained his senses, the light wind sword was already at his neck. Even if you put your life on the line, you won't be able to change the outcome. You're not my match at all. A faint smile hung at the corner of Genshin's mouth. However, his gaze was as sharp as a sword as he stared at Tian Zhou. He said indifferently, "Tian Zhou, for the sake of the Tianqing clan, I will allow you to leave behind your last words." "You really dare to kill me?" Tian Zhou roared. His expression had already become extremely ugly. After these few exchanges, he already knew that he was definitely not Genshin's match. Even if he used a battle technique, he would not be able to defeat this youth in front of him who was at most in his 20s. This made it difficult for him, who had always thought that Genshin was only a great Saint Master, to accept this fact. Genshin coldly snorted and said, "You really think that just because you're a member of the Tianqing clan I won't dare to touch you? I've already endured you for a long time. If you kill me, my Tianqing clan will definitely not let you go." Tian Zhou did not reveal the slightest trace of fear. Genshin's gaze turned cold. With a flick of his wrist, the light wind sword's blade fiercely slapped Tian Zhou's face. It was as if he was slapping someone in the face. With a paw sound, the sharp blade cut through the skin on Tian Zhou's face, leaving behind 2 faint traces of blood. "You!" Tian Zhou was enraged. His eyes seemed as if they were about to spit out flames as he stared at Genshin. However, he did not dare to act rashly. If looks could kill, then Genshin would have already been torn to pieces by Tian Zhou's venomous gaze. Humiliation. Tian Zhou felt the greatest humiliation. As a direct descendant of the Tianqing clan, Tian Zhou had an important position in the clan. He was not inferior to even Qin Shao. However, Genshin's actions were no different from a slap to his own face in Tian Zhou's eyes. Tian Zhou almost lost control and went berserk. "You what? So what if I kill you? Don't use the Tianqing clan to threaten me. You still don't represent the Tianqing clan. If it wasn't for Brother Qin Zhao's face, then I would have already taught you a lesson back at the Tianqing clan." Genshin said. Afterwards, he viciously kicked Tian Zhou's chest. Whether it was intentional or not, Genshin's kick just happened to land on the wound he left on Tian Zhou's chest. Tian Zhou groaned as his body was sent flying through the air by Genshin's kick. He flew for a distance of 5 or 6 meters before landing heavily on the ground. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face had already become incomparably pale, without a trace of blood. His chest was already bright red. Jianqin quickly walked over with the light wind sword in hand. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword qi as it was aimed at Tianzhou's throat. Just as he was about to stab down, a weak voice suddenly came from behind him. Jianqin, don't kill him. Can you let him go just this once? He is my uncle after all. Qin Shao had already woken up. He strenuously turned his head to look in Jianqin's direction as he spoke weakly. Jianqin's light wind sword stopped right in front of Tianzhou's face. That bone-chilling coldness had already spread throughout Tianzhou's body, but he still did not reveal the slightest trace of fear. Having been on the battlefield of life and death for so many years, Tianzhou did not know how many life and death situations he had experienced. Death was not something that could bring fear to his heart. Jianqin gritted his teeth as he stared fiercely at Tianzhou like a hungry wolf. In a low voice he said, "Out of respect for Brother Qin Shao, I will spare your life today." After saying that, Jianqin put away the light wind sword. His eyes inadvertently fell on the interspatial ring on Tianzhou's finger. Without any trace of politeness, he took the ring off and walked over to Qin Shao. Tianzhou's face was gloomy as he crawled up from the ground. His cold gaze lingered on Jianqin's back for a while. Then, without saying a word, he clutched the wound on his chest and turned to leave. His interspatial ring had been taken away by Jianqin. Although he felt extremely humiliated, he did not dare say a single word. A gentleman's revenge was a dish best served cold. As long as he could leave this place alive, he would have a chance to make a comeback. Even the humiliation he had suffered today was not impossible. The bloodied third brother staggered behind Tianzhou as well. His face was sunken, and he could not hide the intense killing intent in his eyes as he stood with his back to Jianqin. Jianqin's footsteps paused as he turned to look at the third brother and said, "Who said you could leave?" With a wave of his sword, a sharp sword qi shot towards the third brother. The third brother had already been heavily injured in the previous battle. Right now, even walking required a lot of effort. He was completely unable to dodge the sword qi and was directly pierced through. The third brother, whose body had already been dyed red with blood, fell straight to the ground. There was already a thumb-sized hole in his neck. Tianzhou's body trembled slightly, but he did not stop moving. He dragged his heavy footsteps as he walked away, disappearing into the distance very quickly. Jianqin arrived in front of Qin Shao and crouched down. He checked his wounds before feeding the other 2 pills that contained Radiant Saint Force into Qin Zhao's mouth. "No, Jianqin, 1 more is enough for me. Give the other one to Big Brother Zithermaster." Qin Shao extended his hand to stop Jianqin from feeding him the other 2 pills. Jianqin nodded and stuffed one of the pills into Qin Zhao's mouth. He then arrived beside the Zithermaster and gave him the last pill. The Zithermaster hesitated slightly before taking the pill from Jianqin and stuffing it into his mouth. He then closed his eyes and began to heal. He was naturally taciturn and rarely took the initiative to speak such useless words. Jianqin arrived in front of the yellow-clothed girl and said indifferently, "I'll have to trouble you to look after the 2 of them. I'll go find some things nearby." The yellow-clothed girl glanced at Jianqin before angrily turning her head away. She did not say anything. Jianqin did not say anything else. He looked around and tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His body shot off into the distance like an arrow released from a bow. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the mountains. Looking at the mountain where Jianqin had disappeared, the yellow-clothed girl with the golden longbow on her back pouted unhappily. A trace of anger still remained on her beautiful face. Jianqin returned very quickly. He carried a bundle of twigs as thick as a wrist on his back. Jianqin threw the bundle of twigs on the ground, then took out some ropes and a blanket from a space ring and began to get busy. Very soon, a simple stretcher was made. Jianchen placed the stretcher in front of Qin Shao and carefully picked up Qin Zhao's burly body and placed him on the stretcher. Now that half of Qin Zhao's waist had been cut off, he could not even stand up or crawl, let alone walk. He could only be carried on the stretcher. "Brother Jianchen, it's been hard on you." Qin Zhao's eyes were brimming with tears. Jianchen's face turned serious. "Qin Shao, if you treat me as a brother, then don't be so courteous." Qin Shao tightly grasped Jianchen's hand. Although he did not say anything, his heart was filled with gratitude. After putting Qin Shao on the stretcher, Jianchen raised the stretcher with one hand and placed it at shoulder level. He then turned his head to look at the Zither Master. "Can you still walk?" After the Zither Master ate the pill that contained the Light Saint Force, the injuries on her body had improved. Although it could not completely heal her, she was much stronger than before. The Zither Master stood up from the ground with some difficulty. She looked at Jianchen with a complicated gaze and said, "I'm fine. I can't continue fighting, but I can still run. We can't stay here for long. Let's get out of here, quickly." Jianchen said. The Zither Master and the yellow-clothed girl did not have any objections to this suggestion. Immediately, Jianchen took away the space belts of second brother, third brother, and fourth brother, and left with them. Boom! Suddenly, a sound came from afar. It was accompanied by a huge energy fluctuation. Jianchen and the others felt the ground shake slightly. Boom, 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 boom. In the distance, the huge sound was mixed with the surging energy fluctuation. The ground was shaking and trembling. Although they were very far away, small cracks appeared on the ground around Jianchen and the others. Jianchen and the others stopped and stared into the distance. Due to a huge hillside blocking their line of sight, they were unable to see the scene in the distance. There are people fighting in the distance. They are very strong. Jianchen's face became serious as he said in a deep voice. As soon as his voice fell, a huge iron seal flew up from the hillside. Just as a corner was revealed, it quickly fell down. Bang! With a dull sound, the ground began to shake violently again. This time it was even more intense than before. It was as if an earthquake had occurred. "That's the seal of Treasure Mountain." The yellow-clothed girl was shocked. Her face immediately became serious as she said in a deep voice, "The stone statue is definitely fighting with someone. Looking at the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain, the opponent is clearly very strong. Otherwise, there are many people." At this moment, the seal of Treasure Mountain flew up again. Its height was just above the hillside, allowing Jianchen and the others to see it clearly. However, before the seal of Treasure Mountain could fall down, a figure flew up into the sky. He wielded a huge sword and slashed down viciously at the 100-meter-large seal of Treasure Mountain. Boom! It was as if a thunderclap had come from the horizon. It was deafening. Accompanied by a surging energy fluctuation, the 100-meter-large seal of Treasure Mountain actually shook from the slash. It was constantly pushed back. Chapter 305. Jianchen's expression also became serious. He said in a low voice, "It's not appropriate for us to clash with them right now. Let's leave this place quickly." If he didn't have the heavily injured Qin Shao in his hands, Jianchen probably wouldn't be able to resist taking a look out of curiosity. However, in order to ensure the safety of Qin Shao, he had no choice but to temporarily avoid them. Jianchen's left hand carried the stretcher and the yellow-clothed girl as he quickly ran off into the distance. The Zither Master also tightly clenched her teeth and followed closely behind the two of them. The ground trembled violently and the entire hillside was shaking. Many places had already cracked open, and the sound of intense fighting in the distance was incessant. Just from the sound alone, one could hear the intensity of the battle. A few bolder people were attracted by the sounds and hurried in the direction of the battle. The majority of them had lost their space belts and were carrying large bags on their backs. They were in a sorry state. However, when they saw Jianchen's group carrying the injured, Two people who were still in good condition immediately ran towards Jinshin's group. The two people moved extremely quickly and arrived several hundred meters away very quickly. Afterwards, they slowed down and sized up Jinshin's group. When they saw that Jinshin and the yellow-clothed girl were at most 25 years old, their courage couldn't help but increase. One of them loudly shouted, "You guys stop right there!" After saying that, the two people quickly approached Jinshin's group. Jinshin's gaze turned cold. However, the yellow-clothed girl's movements were even faster than his. She very decisively took off the golden longbow hanging on her back and directly pulled the bowstring. In an instant, two golden arrows were shot out. The golden arrow was like a rainbow, leaving behind a faint golden tail in the sky. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky, shooting towards the two people at lightning speed. The two people on the other side had already taken out their saint weapons the moment the girl took off her longbow. When the golden arrows shot towards them with lightning speed, the two of them simultaneously brandished their saint weapons and slashed at the arrows with surging saint force. Earth Saint Masters! Jinshin was shocked. As soon as the two people attacked, he knew their strength from the surging saint force. Boom! Boom! Two loud explosions rang out, and the surging energy waves instantly submerged the two of them. The soil on the ground was sent flying, and the weeds and debris flew all over the sky. The two of them were sent flying by the powerful energy shock waves. While they were in the air, blood spurted out from their mouths uncontrollably. Although the yellow-clothed girl was young, she was decisive in her killing. She didn't look like a young lady who grew up in a greenhouse at all. Instead, she looked more like an iron-blooded warrior who had experienced countless life and death battles. She immediately took a few steps forward. Her white and tender fingers gently plucked the bowstring. She slowly pulled the bowstring back, and a golden arrow formed completely out of energy, quickly condensed. Whoosh! Two sharp piercing sounds rang out, and another two golden arrows with long, beautiful tails shot towards the two lying on the ground, piercing through their chests in front of their terrified eyes. Ah! The two of them let out miserable cries. A fist-sized hole had already appeared in their chests. The golden arrows had pierced through their bodies, and the remnant energy in their bodies rampaged through their bodies. In the blink of an eye, their internal organs were smashed to pieces. Their miserable cries came to an abrupt end, and they slowly stopped breathing. Just like that, two Earth Saint Masters were slain by the girl with a simple flick of her bowstring. This scene was clearly seen by a few people in the distance. A few people who originally wanted to make things difficult for Jinshin immediately gave up on the thought in fear. Who is that yellow-clothed girl? She's actually so powerful. Those two people were the Earth Saint Masters who stole our entry token, but they were actually killed by her so easily. I think that girl isn't very old. She's so powerful at such a young age. I wonder who will be so lucky in the future to be her husband. Sho, be careful with what you say. If that girl hears you, she'll directly shoot an arrow at us in anger. We'll all be done for then, yeah, you brat. Be careful of what you say. Be careful of what you say. Don't say anything you shouldn't say, a few people in the distance discussed in low voices as they stared at Jinshin's group. No one dared to approach them anymore. The small incident on the way did not cause much of an obstruction to Jinshin's group. Jinshin carried the stretcher in his left hand as he quickly ran forward. When he arrived in front of the two Earth Saint Masters, he directly bent down and took away their storage items, a space ring and an exquisite, high-quality space belt. The yellow-clothed girl watched from the side as Jinshin took away their storage items. She did not say anything as she hung her bow on her back and quickly followed behind Jinshin. The battle with the stone statues lasted for a very long time. Even though Jinshin was already 10 kilometers away, he could still faintly hear the sounds of battle from behind. Jinshin's group did not stop for even a moment. They did not slow down at all as they continued to advance in a straight line. 6 hours later, Gentian and the girl had left the area and found a cave to rest in. There was still a pile of firewood in the pitch-black cave. Someone lived in this cave not too long ago. Whatever, I'll just take it for myself first. Gentian muttered to himself before carefully placing the zither and flute on the ground. He gathered the scattered branches that had not yet been completely burned and lit a torch to provide some light. The firewood won't take long. You guys stay in the cave and rest first. I'll go out and find some wood. After saying that, Gentian turned around and left the cave. He then climbed up a hill at the back of the cave and specifically chose the withered trees to chop down. Just as Gentian was collecting wood, a series of footsteps entered Gentian's ears. He did not stop because of this and calmly tied up some of the withered branches on the ground. Soon, two figures appeared before Gentian's eyes. From their appearance, both of them were over 40 years old. One of them was tall and sturdy with a bald head. He wore a black vest with thick and powerful arms exposed. His skin was somewhat dark, and he wore blue trousers and a pair of cloth shoes. The other person had a well-proportioned body. He was neither tall nor short, neither fat nor skinny. He had a common face, and a pair of ordinary eyes would flicker with light from time to time. He wore white robes that were slightly damaged and covered in green spots from traveling through the forest. As Gentian studied the two of them studied Gentian as well. When the two of them discovered that Gentian was only in his 20s, they immediately relaxed. Gentian only glanced at the two of them before lowering his head and continuing to organize the branches on the ground. He used tree bark as a rope to tie up the bundles of wood before stowing them away in his space ring. Now that Gentian was an Earth Saint Master, there was no need for him to continue hiding his space ring. With his current strength, he could protect his belongings. As a result, Gentian had worn the space ring when he was still with the Tianqing clan. When the middle-aged man discovered the space ring on Gentian's hand, an undetectable light flashed through his eyes, but he did not show it on the surface. The large man took out a jug of alcohol from his space ring and gulped down a few mouthfuls before letting out a carefree sigh. He then said to Gentian, "Brother, you really are brave. You actually have the guts to participate in the mercenary tournament at such a young age. You really are admirable. Oh, right. What are you going to do with all this wood?" Gentian raised his head and glanced at the large man again. The large man had a simple and honest appearance and a pair of extremely clear eyes. "I'm obviously going to start a fire with this wood," Gentian indifferently replied. Very soon, Gentian had gathered enough wood. He tossed the wood into his space ring and left without looking back. The large man and the middle-aged man remained where they were as they watched Gentian leave. After quite a while, the middle-aged man slowly said, "This young man is not simple." I also feel that he is not simple. He dares to participate in the mercenary tournament at such a young age. He's much stronger than I was back then. I admire him," the large man chuckled. The middle-aged man sneered, "Doctorin, you can't judge people like that. Did you notice the ring on the young man's hand? That's a space ring." "A space ring." The large man was surprised before dryly laughing. He extended his hand and rubbed his bald head. With a rather awkward expression, he said, "I really didn't notice that. Yunjang, you're much better at judging people than I am. But who cares what ring it is? A normal space ring is enough for me. If it really doesn't work, I'll just prepare another one. It's practical and cost-effective and saves money." The middle-aged man didn't continue to speak. He stared at the direction Gentian left for a moment before leaving with the large man. Gentian quickly returned to the cave using the original path. He then took out all the firewood from his space ring and piled them up at the edge of the cave. Because Qin Shao was heavily injured and couldn't move, Gentian planned to stay in the cave for 10 days to half a month. At the very least, he had to wait for Qin Zhao's injuries to stabilize. Therefore, he collected a lot of firewood, piling them up in a corner. They were all wrist-sized sticks that could burn for a long time. After adding some firewood to the torches, Jianqin took out some healing medicine from Qin Zhao's space ring and applied it to Qin Zhao's wounds. He then used a layer of white gauze to bandage the wounds. The zither master, who was also heavily injured, also took out some healing medicine that she had already prepared and swallowed it. She then sat cross-legged on the ground and closed her eyes to control the medicine in her body to heal her injuries. The yellow-clothed woman sat on a rock in the corner. She took down the longbow on her back and placed it in front of her. She gently stroked it with a focused expression. The entire cave was very quiet. Only the crackling sound of the burning torches could be heard from time to time. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside the cave. Jianqin, who was bandaging Qin Zhao's wounds, immediately stopped what he was doing. He stared at the entrance of the cave with a sharp gaze. He was ready to fight. Although Qin Zhao's injuries had stabilized, he didn't have the slightest bit of fighting strength. His waist was injured, so he couldn't use any strength. He had to protect Qin Zhao. The yellow-clothed woman also slowly raised her head and stared at the entrance of the cave. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on the golden longbow. Although there weren't many people who could threaten them here. A few hours ago, they had discovered Shi Xiangran and a powerhouse who also had a king weapon. They couldn't help but be vigilant. Soon, two figures appeared in front of Jianqin, one in front and one behind. With the help of the firelight, he could clearly see that the person walking in front was a bald man wearing a black vest. The man was tall and sturdy, with a stocky back and a bare waist. A pair of thick and sturdy arms were exposed. Behind the man was a middle-aged man with an average face and a well-proportioned body. They were the two people that Jianqin had met when he went to the mountain to collect firewood. Chapter 306. The eyes of the two immediately fell on the body of the yellow-clothed girl. When the burly man saw the devastatingly beautiful face of the yellow-clothed girl, he was stunned for a moment. But he quickly recovered and revealed a depressed expression. He said, "Little girl, you are really beautiful. I have been walking for 30 years, and I have never seen a girl as beautiful as you. But why did you ask me to go out? This cave was discovered by me. I had just left for a while when you came in and occupied my cave. You should be the one to go out." As he spoke, the man glanced around the cave. Very soon, he discovered Jianqin, who he had met not long ago. He was immediately stunned, but then he smiled and said, "What a coincidence! Little brother, we meet again so soon." Jianqin glanced at the man and the middle-aged man behind him. With his sharp intuition and the presence they gave off, he had already deduced that the two of them were Earth Saint Masters. Although less than a tenth of the people on the Tianyuan continent could successfully break through to Earth Saint Master, and only 1% of the people who could reach Earth Saint Master before the age of 50, all the people who could participate in the mercenary gathering were the cream of the crop. Even if it was only 1%, Earth Saint Masters was still quite a large number among the several tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people participating in the mercenary gathering. There were at least several hundred to over 1,000 people. Now that the competition had reached its end, the people who were still alive were basically all Earth Saint Masters. Only a small number of Great Saint Masters were Earth Saint Masters. So Jianqin did not find it strange that the two people he had casually met to be Earth Saint Masters. The man did not even wait for Jianqin's reply. He walked to the edge of the cave and sat down with his back against the wall. He chuckled and said to Jianqin, "Little brother, since you've all been injured, I won't chase you away. Let's all stay here together. It's livelier with more people anyway. We can even talk when we're bored. Isn't that great? Yunjiang, don't you think so?" The last sentence was said to the middle-aged man who was still standing at the entrance of the cave. The middle-aged man smiled and nodded. "Doctor is right. If you don't mind, let's all rest here. If we run into any trouble, we can help each other. After all, there's strength in numbers." With that, the middle-aged man walked over to the man's side and sat down. He casually looked at Jianqin and the others. The yellow-clothed girl's face was still as cold as ice. Her beautiful eyes carried a trace of sharpness as she constantly glanced between the man and the middle-aged man. Although the two of them had shown good intentions, she still did not let down her guard. Jianqin looked at the yellow-clothed girl and slightly hesitated. He then nodded. "All right then, we'll all stay in this cave. However, I have to say this first. If anyone dares to do anything to harm us, don't blame me for being merciless." Towards the end, Jianqin's tone became even sharper. A strong killing intent flashed through his eyes. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's face became slightly uncomfortable. He, a mighty Earth Saint Master, was actually being threatened by a brat who was only in his 20s. Anyone would feel slightly displeased. However, the more it was like this, the more the middle-aged man was certain that Jianqin was not ordinary. To be able to last until the end of the elimination round that was filled with slaughter, and to be completely unscathed, coupled with his arrogant tone and attitude of not putting the two of them in his eyes, Jianqin definitely had something to rely on. He was definitely not arrogant and conceited. Perhaps the man did not hear the threat in Jianqin's tone and continued to chuckle. "I'm called Doctrine. The person beside me is called Yunjiang. Little brother, what's your name?" Seeing that the man was not pretending to be simple and honest, Jianqin immediately concluded that the man was definitely a loyal and honest person. These kinds of people usually did not have many schemes in their minds, so there was no need to be wary of them when interacting with them. With the dusty memories unraveled, Jianqin immediately thought of his own elder brother, Changyang Hu and Tai Ta, who he had met in Kargith Academy. These two people's personalities were somewhat similar to the man in front of him. From a certain aspect, they were the same kind of people. As a result, Jianqin's impression of the man called Doctor and immediately improved by a lot. "I'm called Jianqin." Jianqin's lips curled into a faint smile as he spoke to Doctor and in a friendly manner. The beautiful eyes of the yellow-clothed girl, sitting in the corner, gazed at the faint smile on Jianqin's face. Her gaze gradually became complicated, but the sharpness in her eyes and the coldness on her face gradually faded away. A rare softness appeared on her face. Because of his genetic inheritance and the body refining technique, Jianqin's appearance was already very handsome. It could be said to be perfect. His smile was even more enchanting. There were not many girls in the world who would not be moved by it. Even the yellow-clothed girl, not far away, stared blankly. However, she quickly recovered and immediately turned her gaze away with a taut face. She no longer stared at Jianqin. "Jianqin, I see that you are so young. You must not be more than 25 years old," Doctor said with a serious face. Jianqin chuckled and did not reply, which could be considered as a tacit agreement. Doctor turned his head and looked at the yellow-clothed girl. He continued to ask, "Little girl, you are very beautiful. I was almost mesmerized by you just now. What is your name?" The yellow-clothed girl coldly snorted. She did not even look at the big man. She slightly raised her head and leaned against the wall behind her. She stared blankly at the dusky cave ceiling. The man smiled awkwardly and looked at Jianqin as if he was asking for help. "Doctor, and ignore her. Her temper is not good," Jianqin said with a smile. He did not know the yellow-clothed girl's name. He only heard Shi Xiangran call her Luan, at the beginning. As soon as Jianqin's voice fell, the yellow-clothed girl immediately turned her head. She angrily glared at Jianqin and shouted, "You are the one with a bad temper!" Doctor secretly glanced at the yellow-clothed girl. He reached out his hand and touched his nose. He thought to himself, "It seems that Jianqin was right. Although this little girl looks very fresh, her temper is not ordinary. I cannot offend her." Jianqin's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. His expression was very displeased. His heart moved, and he immediately took out several space belts stained with blood and a space ring. "Wow, Jianqin, why do you have so many space belts on you? There is even blood on them. You couldn't have stolen them, right?" Doctor and looked at Gentian with a face full of surprise. He did not cover his mouth. The middle-aged man sitting beside him, Yunjang, also had a face full of surprise. His eyes flashed with an undetectable light. Gentian did not care about Dr. An's words. He chuckled and said, "It can barely be considered stealing." Then, under the shocked gazes of Dr. An and Yunjang, Gentian took out all the items from the space belts and space rings. He then sorted them out and counted them. There were a total of 4 purple gold cards, 3 rank 5 monster cores, over 200 rank 4 monster cores, and over 500 rank 3 monster cores. In addition, there was also a small mountain of coins that sparkled with purple light, gold light, and white light. They were all piled up to 3 feet high. Apart from these, there were also over 400 pitch black competition tokens. Seeing the pile of pitch black competition tokens, Dr. An's eyes immediately widened. He couldn't help but drool from the corner of his mouth as he muttered, "Wow, so many competition tokens!" The middle-aged man sitting beside Dr. An was also moved. His heart began to beat uncontrollably. Gentian didn't even raise his head as he sorted out the items on the ground. He divided them evenly into 2 parts and put one of them into a space belt. He threw it to the girl and said expressionlessly, "Take it. These things belong to you." The girl in yellow glared fiercely at Gentian. She grabbed the space belt beside her and took out over 200 competition tokens. She then threw the space belt back to Gentian and said expressionlessly, "I don't care about those things." Gentian didn't say another word as he immediately picked up the space belt and put the items inside it on himself. There were 2 purple gold cards, 2 level 5 monster cores, over 100 level 4 monster cores, and a large pile of money. He didn't have as much wealth as the girl in yellow to not care about these things. Dr. An stared dumbfoundedly at the yellow-clothed girl as she threw the belt to Gentian. He swallowed his saliva with some difficulty and turned his head to look at Gentian's handsome face. That bald head of his kept banging against the wall behind him. With some regret, he muttered to himself, "Why can't I be a bit younger? Why can't I be a bit more handsome? Only now do I realize that being handsome is actually so popular. Those beautiful girls just took the initiative to give you so many good things." Dr. An sat there muttering to himself as if there was no one around. He didn't notice that when he said this, the chest of a young girl in yellow sitting on a rock in the corner rose and fell violently a few times. Her eyes seemed to be about to spit out raging flames as she glared fiercely at Dr. Yunjang, who was sitting beside Dr. An, also stared blankly at the girl in yellow and Gentian. The girl in yellow's generosity made him feel shocked. 2 purple gold cards, 2 level 5 monster cores, over 100 level 4 monster cores, and a large pile of money were given away so casually. This made him feel a bit of disbelief. This was not a small amount of wealth. Even as an Earth Saint Master, he was moved. Chapter 307. In the blink of an eye, Gentian's group had already stayed in the cave for 7 days. During this time, Gentian, Dr. An, and Yunjang got along very well. The yellow-clothed girl was still the same as before, rarely speaking. Even now, Gentian still didn't know her name. Qin Zhao's injuries had already gradually improved. Although the huge wound on his waist hadn't completely healed, at least it had already formed a scar. With the help of healing medicine, it was believed that he would be able to walk in 10 days to half a month. The Zither Master's injuries had also recovered by 70%. She already possessed a certain amount of battle strength. With her valiant strength, she would be able to fully recover in a few days. In the somewhat dusky cave, the torches that had been burning nonstop for several days slowly flickered. Sitting cross-legged to the side, Gentian slowly opened his eyes. His gaze swept over the cave. The Zither Master, the yellow-clothed girl, and Dr. An were all sitting cross-legged on the ground, cultivating. Qin Xiao was still lying on the stretcher with his eyes closed. It was unknown whether he had fallen asleep or what. Only Yunjang wasn't in the cave, his whereabouts unknown. Jianchen got up to add some wood to the bonfire, then walked out of the cave. When he disappeared from the cave, the yellow-clothed girl sitting cross-legged on the ground, cultivating, slowly opened her eyes. She looked in the direction Jianchen had left, then closed her eyes again. She sat there motionless like an old monk in meditation. Arriving outside the cave, Jianchen fiercely breathed in the fresh and comfortable air outside. Then he closed his eyes with an intoxicated expression. After staying in the cave with poor ventilation for so long, the slightly dry and hot air inside had long since made people feel very uncomfortable. Jianchen took a deep breath, then climbed up the hillside in boredom and wandered around nearby. Right now he had to protect Qin Xiao, so he didn't dare to go far. Moreover, before Qin Xiao's injuries were healed, Jianchen didn't plan to leave this place. This was because bringing Qin Xiao, who was inconvenient to move, on the road would be troublesome if they encountered a strong person. Even if he wasn't afraid, if the opponent targeted Qin Xiao, then Jianchen would fall into a very passive situation. During this period of time, Jianchen had collected quite a few tokens as well. In total, he had over 1,000 tokens. In this elimination round, he only needed to collect the top 500 tokens to pass. So the 1,000 tokens on Jianchen were enough for him to pass. Now, all he needed to do was stay here and endure the remaining month. Jianchen jumped onto a 30-meter tall tree and laid down on a thick branch. He couldn't help but think of Ming Dong, who was staying in the mysterious shrine. He muttered, "I wonder how Ming Dong's situation is now." His ancestor and that mysterious shrine master were very good friends. That shrine master will definitely help Ming Dong. When I see Ming Dong again, he will definitely have changed greatly. This time's mercenary tournament is the easiest way to obtain a heaven tier battle skill. I must do my best and obtain a heaven tier battle skill. Once my strength is enough, I will return to the kingdom of Jessen and settle the debt with the Huayan sect. With the assistance of a heaven tier battle skill, the strength of Changyang Prefecture will also greatly increase. Jianchen muttered to himself as he laid down on a tree branch, his eyes shining with unprecedented determination. But shortly after, Jianchen let out a long sigh. A trace of worry appeared between his brows as he said, "Right now, the kingdom of Jessen's situation is very bad. The surrounding 4 kingdoms are about to join forces to attack the kingdom of Jessen. I estimate that war will break out in the next 1 or 2 years. In the following period of time, I must work even harder to increase my strength. I hope that when the time comes, I will be able to help a little." Just as Jianchen was laying down on a tree branch and making plans for his future journey, 3 figures were rapidly running in his direction from afar. They were like arrows that had been released from a bow, their speed extremely fast. The 3 people were chasing and fleeing. The person running in front had a pale complexion and was covered in blood. The white robes he wore were mostly dyed red with blood. The 2 people behind him were still fully clothed and were holding saint weapons in their hands as they chased after him. Jianchen also discovered the 3 people in the distance. He gently pushed aside the branches and leaves that were blocking his line of sight. With his outstanding eyesight, he clearly saw the 3 people's appearances. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes as he lightly smiled and said, "I didn't think that he would be in such a sorry state from being chased. It seems that he wants to lead them back to his home." As he spoke, Jianchen jumped down from the tree branch. He calmly stood under the tree and stared at the 3 people approaching in his direction. Of the 3 people, the one running in front was Yunzheng, who lived in the same cave as Jianchen. At this moment, Yunzheng was in an extremely sorry state and had long since lost his former elegance. When Yunzheng discovered Jianchen in front of him, an indescribable light flashed through his eyes. He immediately increased his speed and rapidly approached Jianchen. Very quickly, the pale-faced Yunzheng stopped by Jianchen's side, panting for breath. He hurriedly said, "Little brother Jianchen, let's go quickly." Those two people are very strong. Let's go back and call Doctor in to deal with them together." Jianchen smiled and shook his head, saying, "My brother is currently recuperating there. I don't want him to be disturbed in the slightest." But Yun Zheng's face was filled with anxiety. Just as he wanted to say something, Jianchen extended a hand to stop him. He indifferently said, "Let's settle it here." Hearing Jianchen's indifferent tone, a light flashed through Yun Zheng's eyes. He slowly calmed down and then quietly stood behind Jianchen. He wanted to see just how Jianchen would deal with the two Earth Saint Masters who were even stronger than him. The two Earth Saint Masters, chasing after Yunzheng, also stopped 10 meters away from Jianchen. The two of them were middle-aged men in their 40s. They wore light blue-tight clothes that tightened their firm muscles. One of them was short, only about 1.5 meters tall. His skin was extremely dark like coal. The other was skinnier and had an ordinary appearance. He had a hooked nose and 6 or 7 vicious scars crisscrossed the left side of his face. He looked extremely terrifying, but it also added a bit of fierceness to him. The two men sized up Jianchen. They did not place him in their eyes at all. The two of them looked at each other, and then one of them immediately arrived behind Jianchen, blocking off Jianchen and Yun Zheng's path of retreat. Jianchen slowly crossed his arms and looked at the short man with a smile. He said, "You too, may I ask what the meaning of this is?" Seeing Jianchen's calm appearance, the short man faintly felt that something was wrong. However, he did not think too much about it. He angrily glared at Jianchen and Yunzheng and yelled, "If you know what's good for you, immediately hand over your space belts, and I'll spare your lives. Otherwise, what else can I do?" Jianchen continued to smile. The short man's gaze suddenly became sharp. He viciously glared at Jianchen and angrily yelled, "Otherwise, the two of you will die here today." Jianchen's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent as he said, "Since it's like this, I'll send you on your way." As soon as he finished speaking, Jianchen left behind an afterimage and instantly appeared in front of the short man. At the same time, the silver light wind sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. It carried a powerful and chilling sword chi as it pierced towards the short man. It was as fast as lightning. The short man did not think that Jianchen would suddenly attack. Moreover, his speed was so fast that before he could react, the silver sword had already pierced through his throat. Jianchen's sword was just too fast. The short man was caught off guard and was killed in a single exchange. Even though he was an Earth Saint Master, it was still difficult for him to dodge Jianchen's incomparably fast sword. Jianchen's movements did not stop at all. He immediately pulled out the bloodied sword from the short man's neck. With a slight sway of his body, he turned into a blur as he charged toward the skinny Earth Saint Master behind him. At this time, the Earth Saint Master finally reacted. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Jianchen charging towards him. At this moment, his expression became extremely serious. This was because he suddenly realized that the youth he had never placed in his eyes was actually a tiger in sheep's clothing. "Huh!" The skinny man roared as Saint Force surged out from his body. The large sword in his hand was covered in a thick layer of blue light as it mercilessly chopped towards Jianchen's head. Jianchen's body slightly swayed as he nimbly dodged the skinny man's attack. The light wind sword turned into a silver bolt of lightning as it pierced towards the skinny man's throat. The skinny man's reaction wasn't slow either. He tilted his head and narrowly dodged the light wind sword, causing the light wind sword to brush past his neck. However, before the skinny man could even rejoice, the light wind sword that had just brushed past his neck had already sliced horizontally across it. In the next moment, the skinny man felt a slight pain from his neck as the scene in front of him began to spin. His entire head had already been cut off as it spun and fell to the ground. From the severed neck, a 2-meter-tall pillar of blood spurted out. The two arrogant Earth Saint Masters who had beaten Yunzheng into a sorry state had been killed by Jianqin in the blink of an eye. Standing to the side, Yun Zheng stared with wide eyes. His face was filled with disbelief. This kind of battle prowess, was it really possible for a youth in his 20s to possess such strength? Standing to the side, Yun Zheng had originally planned to watch how Jianqin dealt with the two Earth Saint Masters. Although he had already guessed that Jianqin would be able to deal with the two Earth Saint Masters, he never would have thought that the two Earth Saint Masters who had chased after him would be so weak in front of Jianqin. They were simply unable to withstand a single blow. Chapter 308. After dealing with the two of them, Jianqin went up to the two Earth Saint Masters and removed their space belts. He then rummaged through their bodies, but he didn't find anything of value. Although the two of them were Earth Saint Masters, they still wore space belts instead of space rings. Space rings were extremely precious on the Tianyuan continent. They were a symbol of status and strength. Although Earth Saint Masters had the right to wear space rings, not every Earth Saint Master possessed one. Jianqin glanced at Yun Zheng, whose clothes were dyed red with blood, and indifferently said, "Let's go back. You should treat your wounds as soon as possible. It's not safe to walk around with wounds." With that, Jianqin left the area and made his way back to the cave. Yun Zheng watched Jianqin's figure slowly disappear into the distance. His face was filled with shock, the shock that had yet to recede from his eyes. The scene of Jianqin killing the two Earth Saint Masters had left an indelible impression on Yun Zheng. Sigh, is this a legendary genius? Yun Zheng finally sighed after quite a while. He then moved his feet and followed Jianqin back to the cave. When the two of them returned to the cave, Yun Zheng's blood-drenched body immediately attracted everyone's attention. Senior In, who had the best relationship with Yun Zheng, immediately stood up and furiously said, "Yun Zheng, which bastard injured you? Tell me, and I'll rip him to shreds." Yun Zheng smiled when he sensed the concern in Senior An's voice. "I was unlucky. When I was out hunting, I ran into two Earth Saint Masters who were slightly stronger than me. Fortunately, I ran into little brother Jianqin. The two of them were killed in a single clash by little brother Jianqin." A gleam of light flashed through Qin Zhao's eyes when he heard what Yun Zheng had said. He stared at Jianqin in pleasant surprise, but there was also some doubt and disbelief. He asked, "Jianqin, is he telling the truth? What did you do to two Earth Saint Masters with just a picture?" Qin Zhao's voice was filled with anticipation. The Zither Master was sitting to the side with her eyes closed. Her ears twitched slightly, but she didn't open her eyes. Jianqin nodded slightly and did not deny it. Qin Zhao's face was filled with unconcealable joy. He excitedly said, "Jianqin, when did you become so powerful? Although I felt that you were very powerful when we fought, I felt that you couldn't easily kill an Earth Saint Master." "That's because I had successfully broken through to Earth Saint Master in just a dozen or so days after leaving the Tianqin clan," said Jianqin. Hearing these words, the Zither Master's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. Her gaze was filled with astonishment as she looked at Jianqin. Then she closed her eyes and remained motionless like a stone statue. "I see." Qin Shao was enlightened. Time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, there was only half a month left until the end of the elimination round. During this half a month, Jianqin rarely went out. He spent most of his time in the cave, silently guarding Qin Shao. The yellow-clothed girl had used the sun-moon bow to carve out another cave half a month ago. She lived there alone and silently cultivated. On the other hand, Yun Zheng and Doctor went out every day. Many times, they would drag their injured bodies back. There were even a few times when they were chased to their home by several powerful Earth Saint Masters. But it was Jianqin who helped them deal with them. The great battle prowess that Jianqin had displayed had deeply impressed Dr. N and Yun Zheng. They were all Earth Saint Masters, but the difference between them was like heaven and earth. The second and third cycle Earth Saint Masters were not Jianqin's opponent at all. As time passed, Dr. N and Yunjung unknowingly began to treat Jianqin as their pillar of support. After so many days of rest, Qin Zhao's injuries had completely healed. Perhaps it was because of Jianqin's stimulation, but after recovering, Qin Zhao focused all of his attention on cultivation. He used the power of the monster cores to increase his strength, striving to reach the Earth Saint Master level as soon as possible. The Zither Master, who had long since recovered from her injuries, was the same. Her words were as precious as gold. Ever since she had met Jianqin, she had never spoken more than 10 sentences. She was even more taciturn than Katafiai, whom Jianqin had met in Wake City. In the dim cave, only the flickering flames of the bonfire illuminated the entire cave. The light flickered and flickered. Jianqin sat cross-legged in a corner, a Class 5 monster core in his hand. He constantly absorbed the energy within to cultivate. Now that the kingdom of Jessen was in great danger, the Changyang prefecture would not be spared either. He urgently needed to increase his strength and could not waste a single bit of his free time. The entire gloomy cave was affected by their cultivation. The energy that leaked out from time to time gathered in the cave, turning this very ordinary cave into a paradise. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Jianqin's ears twitched slightly as he cultivated, but he did not make any movements. The footsteps quickly approached as Dr. N and Yunjung walked in from outside. Jianqin, good news, good news. I just heard some rumors outside. It said that in the southernmost forest there is an expert's cultivation cave. There are countless treasures inside, and there is at least one heaven-tier battle skill. Dr. N said eagerly, his expression incomparably excited. When they heard about a heaven-tier battle skill, the people cultivating in the cave all opened their eyes. Although they were all cultivating, they were all vigilant towards the outside world in this place. Nothing that happened outside could escape their senses. Qin Zhao's eyes widened as he said in shock, "Heaven-tier battle skill? Is what you said true? Could it be that someone deliberately spread fake news and then set up a huge trap there, waiting for people to take the bait?" Dr. N shook his head and said, "I don't know about that, but there are already many people rushing there. It's said that even the 5 great experts have gone there." 5 great experts? What 5 great experts? Qin Zhao asked doubtfully. The 5 great experts are the most famous people recently. At the same time, they are also the most powerful people. This news only spread recently, and now there is practically no one who doesn't know about them. The one who spoke this time was Yunjung. He couldn't help glancing at Jianqin. He didn't know who was stronger between Jianqin and the 5 great experts. Jianqin's heart trembled as he asked, "Then what are the 5 great experts called?" "They are called Qin Ji, Dugafeng, Tianmuling, Shixiangran, Jiewukong," Yunjung said. Jianqin frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice, "I didn't expect him to rely on 2 treasures to become one of the 5 great experts. Jianqin, do you think we should go or not?" Qin Zhao looked at Jianqin. Clearly, he wanted Jianqin to make the decision. Jianqin muttered to himself and said, "Of course we should go." After saying that, Jianqin stood up and said, "There is no time to lose. Let's go now. In any case, there are only 15 days until the end of the competition." Afterwards, Jianqin led Senior and Yunjung, Qin Zhao, and the Zither Master out of the cave at the same time. Coincidentally, the yellow-clothed girl with the golden longbow on her back also happened to walk out of the cave she had dug. "I heard that a heaven-tier battle skill will appear in the south. We plan to go take a look. Are you coming?" Jianqin expressionlessly asked the yellow-clothed girl. The yellow-clothed girl's beautiful eyes paused on Jianqin's face for a moment. In the end, she nodded slightly and didn't say anything. "This time we might meet an old friend. Be prepared," Jianqin said. Then Jianqin's group of 6 left the cave and quickly headed south. Along the way, Jianqin also discovered that quite a few people were heading south. Along the way, they could hear about the Heaven-tier battle skill and the cultivation caves left behind by seniors. All sorts of discussions followed. Almost all of these people were great Saint Masters. Without exception, they all carried bags of various sizes. Their space belts had already been taken away, so the bags only contained some clothes and food. As for these people who had already lost their tokens, the Earth Saint Masters would not make things difficult for them unless there was some deep hatred between them. As a result, these people who were only great Saint Masters did not have the slightest fear as they walked on the road. Along the way, they would occasionally meet a few enemies who would come to blows. However, this didn't affect Genshin's group in the slightest. The people who were able to survive until now were extremely clever. When they saw Genshin's group swagger on the road with their space belts, they couldn't help but guess that Genshin's group was definitely an extremely powerful group. After 5 days of hurrying, Genshin's group finally arrived at a lush forest. The number of participants carrying bags of various sizes gradually increased, and the information they heard became more accurate. I heard that there are quite a few powerful magical beasts guarding the cave. 3 of the 5 experts and over 30 Earth Saint Masters fought with them many times, but they all helplessly retreated. They were unable to approach the cave at all. Yeah, I heard that quite a few Earth Saint Masters have died in these battles. Only the 3 supreme experts of the 5 great experts are unscathed, Genshin said. The magical beasts guarding the cave are just too powerful. If this continues, I'm afraid that they won't be able to enter the cave even when the competition ends. Chapter 309. When Genshin's group approached this place, the information that was being spread became more consistent and more accurate. Now, Genshin was more or less certain. Although he didn't know if there was a Heaven-tier battle skill in the cave, he had at least confirmed the existence of the cave. Genshin didn't stay there and continued to lead the group into the forest. From the information he had heard, he basically knew that the location of the cave was in the depths of the dense forest. Because there were many people going in and out of this place in the past few days, a few flat paths had been created in the dense forest. Genshin followed the people in front and walked for 4 hours before finally arriving at a flat and spacious area that had been excavated by hand. There were already quite a number of people gathered here. There were about 300 people gathered in groups of 3 to 5. There were more than a dozen tents on the ground. From the wide open tent doors, one could clearly see a few people lying inside and resting. There were also many people sitting on the surrounding tall tree trunks. Some were drinking, some were eating, and some were resting on top of the tree trunks. There were quite a few Earth Saint Masters among these people, no less than 40 in total. The rest were great Saint Masters with bags on their backs. Only an extremely small number of great Saint Masters still had their space belts. The people here seemed to have secretly reached some kind of agreement. They didn't fight with each other or fight for the entry token. Instead, they gathered together very peacefully and didn't offend each other. Let's go ahead and take a look. Genshin softly said to the people beside him before continuing forward. Genshin's group attracted quite a few people's attention. Everyone's gazes were cast on this group of people who were wearing bright clothes. But no one went up to make things difficult for Genshin's group. This was because a few people who weren't weak had already sensed that there were 3 Earth Saint Masters in this group. Unless there was a conflict of interest, no one wanted to offend 3 Earth Saint Masters walking together for no reason. When Genshin's group of 6 had walked 5 kilometers forward, a loud beast roar suddenly rang out. Immediately afterwards, an unimaginably powerful energy fluctuation followed, causing the ground to violently tremble. Countless towering trees could be faintly seen being uprooted by the surging energy fluctuation, flying high into the sky. In front of them, through the gaps in the dense forest, they could faintly see a few huge creatures rapidly running over. Their huge auras were faintly transmitted, causing Genshin's group to almost be unable to breathe. Genshin's expression suddenly changed. He extended his hand to pull the people behind him and said, "Retreat, quickly retreat." Without any hesitation, they immediately retreated back along the path they had come from. Very soon, they returned to the open space in the forest that had been excavated. Just as Genshin's group returned, a group of people in tattered clothes walked over from where Genshin's group had retreated. There were a total of 12 people in this group. One of them was a young man who seemed to be around 27 or 28 years old, around the same age as Mingdong. The young man wore light blue clothes and was very handsome. He carried a 2-meter-long, fiery red, great sword on his back. The great sword was a head taller than the young man. There were also 4 people around the age of 30. All of them had outstanding appearances. The rest of them were middle-aged men in their 40s. They all had resolute expressions on their faces. In this group of people, there were a few middle-aged men with blood at the corner of their mouths. Their faces were sickly pale. Clearly, they had suffered heavy injuries. The return of this group of people attracted the gazes of everyone present. The gazes of over 300 people all landed on this group of people. A while later, a buzzing sound of discussion rang out. "Looks like they failed again. Sigh, the magical beasts guarding the dwelling are just too powerful. Humph! How can the magical beasts guarding the dwelling be so easy to deal with? Unless the 5 great experts gather and all of us Earth Saint Masters work together, we'll only be able to suppress the powerful magical beasts. They're just wasting their efforts like this. Let's just wait. The magical beasts guarding the dwelling are unimaginably powerful. They've probably reached Class 6. Only when the 5 great experts gather and work together can we defeat the magical beasts. What a pity. The 5 great experts are all Earth Saint Masters. If there was a Heaven Saint Master, it would be much easier to enter the dwelling." Looking at the long sword on the back of the young man, a gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the girl in yellow. She softly said, "That's a ruler armament." Genshin was slightly surprised. His gaze immediately landed on the young man with the sword on his back. His expression gradually became serious. He had already seen the power of a ruler armament. It was a saint weapon left behind by a fallen saint ruler. It was so powerful that even Heaven Saint Masters would tremble in fear. However, not everyone could use the full power of a ruler armament. An Earth Saint Master could only use 20% of the ruler armament's power. Even so, it was still extremely terrifying. Genshin clearly remembered that a few days ago, there was a huge sword that emitted flames that illuminated the horizon that suppressed Shi Xianran's seal of Treasure Mountain. That battle had attracted many people to watch, but no one knew how it ended. Could this young man be the one who fought with Shi Xiangran? Genshin secretly guessed. The 12 people who returned did not say anything. They walked into several large tents to rest and disappeared from everyone's sight. The magical beast up ahead is very powerful. Let's wait here for a while. When there are more people here, we'll follow them and take a look." Genshin said to the people beside him. Afterward, they each found a spacious area and began to set up their tents. Very soon, 6 tents were set up. Hey, you guys! Who allowed you to set up tents here? Hurry up and tear them down. Hurry up and tear them down. A man around 30 years old walked over from the distance. He angrily stared at Genshin's group and loudly shouted. This person was skinny and wore white clothes. He had an arrogant expression on his face, and there were 3 eye-catching claw marks on his forehead. Everyone's gazes were immediately drawn over. Many people showed a trace of schadenfreude on their faces. These people definitely don't know the rules here. Can't they see that so many of us don't dare to set up tents here? They actually set up a tent each, taking up a large piece of the originally small space. A burly man who sat on a tree trunk and drank muttered to himself, "They've all just arrived here. It looks like they don't know the rules here. Sigh, why aren't they smarter? Can't they see that there are so many of us here, but there are only a dozen tents? Not just anyone can set up a tent here." The person who spoke was a middle-aged man sitting under a tree. The skinny man wearing white clothes had already arrived in front of Jinshin's group. Seeing that Jinshin had no intention of tearing down the tents, he couldn't help but become angry and said, "Didn't you hear me? I told you to tear down the tents right now." Saying that, the youth kicked the Zither Master's tent away. Then, without stopping, he continued to approach Jinshin's tent and kicked out again, attempting to send Jinshin's tent flying. Jinshin's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. The light wind sword appeared in his right hand, and with a flash of silver light, the light wind sword cut through the skinny man's leg with lightning speed. Ah! The skinny man let out a blood-curdling scream. The leg that he had used to kick Jinshin's tent had been cut off, causing blood to flow out. Jinshin withdrew his light wind sword and kicked the skinny man in the chest, sending him flying 10 meters away. Finally, the skinny man fell to the ground and rolled a few times. The skinny man's endurance was obviously very weak. The pain from his leg being cut off caused him to let out a miserable scream. His expression was one of extreme pain. The surrounding people's faces changed as they stared in disbelief at Jinshin's 20-year-old face. The scene in front of them was really out of their expectations. A middle-aged man wearing a purple robe walked out from one of the tents. This man was one of the 12 people who had just returned from the depths of the forest. When the purple-robed man walked out of the tent and saw the skinny man whose leg had been cut off, his eyes flashed with a light that was hard to detect. Then he looked around and said, "What happened here?" The purple-robed man's voice was very calm, as if he was just casually asking a question. At this time, the other tents were also opened and several figures walked out. They were all the people who had just returned from the depths of the forest. The skinny man's scream had caused quite a commotion. "Jesse, who injured you?" A cry of alarm suddenly sounded out as a middle-aged man with a knife scar on his face walked over to the skinny man whose leg had been cut off by Jinshin. His face was filled with anger. "Big brother, it was him. He cut off my leg. My leg. Big brother, you have to help me kill him." The skinny man's face was filled with hatred as he pointed at Jinshin. The pain had already caused his facial muscles to contort, making him look extremely fierce. The middle-aged man with the knife scar gloomily stared at Jinshin. He slowly stood up and condensed a 3-meter-long red spear in his hand. Then, without saying a word, he rushed towards Jinshin. As the spear danced in the air, it brought with it a wave of heat as it pierced towards Jinshin. A sharp light flashed in Jinshin's eyes as the light wind sword collided with the spear. The resulting shockwave from the collision was so strong that the ground within a 10-meter radius was pushed down by a meter. Chapter 310. Jinshin's light wind sword pierced out like a bolt of lightning. One after another, sword shadows flashed in the air, covering the scar-faced man in a sea of sword shadows. The clanging sounds of weapons colliding rang out endlessly, and the surging waves of energy had long since destroyed the area around the scar-faced man. "This brat is not weak. He can actually match Shigu." Seeing Jinshin and the scar-faced man fight, the young man with the fiery red sword muttered to himself. His voice was filled with surprise. This young man is not simple. At such a young age, he can rely on his own strength to match Shigu. Furthermore, he is not at a disadvantage at all. His talent is just too terrifying. In the future, when he truly matures, he will definitely become a famous figure. "Young master, do you think we should try to rope him in?" Beside the young man with the fiery red sword on his back, a middle-aged man in a purple robe softly asked. The young man with the sword on his back had a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he said, "With his strength, he will definitely be able to obtain first place in the mercenary tournament. He is destined to be my opponent." Hearing this, the middle-aged man in purple robes understood what the young master was thinking and did not say anything else. On the other side, a man in his 30s, wearing a white robe embroidered with gold, stood there with his arms crossed as he watched the fight. He slowly said, "Looks like Jed Wukong's people have provoked a strong opponent. I didn't expect him to be so young. Yes, this brat's strength is not bad. He is actually able to match Shigu. If his strength is limited to this, then he is destined to die. Jed Wukong's strength may not be as strong as Shigu, but he has a king armament. Unless he meets someone who also has a king armament, no one will be his opponent. That is, unless there is a heaven saint master here." A middle-aged man beside the white-robed man softly said, "Looks like this young man is destined to die here. With Jed Wukong's personality, he will definitely not allow anyone who dares to challenge him to live." The white-robed man said, "That may not be the case. Young Master Qinji, do you see the girl in yellow behind them?" The middle-aged man standing beside the young man with the sword on his back said with a smile. Hearing this, the young man who was called Young Master Qinji immediately looked over. As soon as he saw the girl, he could not move his eyes away. He absent-mindedly said, "What a beautiful girl! Her face is as cold as ice, and her eyes are calm and cold. She is definitely not a simple girl." The middle-aged man smiled and continued to say, "Young Master Qinji, look at the golden bow on her back." Qinji's gaze immediately moved away from the yellow-clothed girl's face and landed on the longbow on her back, but he couldn't see anything. The middle-aged man said, "Although I don't recognize that bow, I'm certain it's not an ordinary item. It's also not that woman's saint weapon because I can't sense any saint force ripples from it. So I'm guessing that the bow is probably second uncle. Could that bow be?" Qinji's face was full of surprise. "I'm not sure." The middle-aged man shook his head. 3 divine spear styles. First form, spear shadow layer. A loud shout came from the middle of the battlefield. The middle-aged man's spear turned into a sky full of spear shadows, covering the sky as it pierced towards Genshin. The spear shadows were so dense that it was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. At the same time, there was also a pressure that seemed to come from the weapon. This scene was exactly the same as when Genshin used a sword. That's an Earth-class battle skill. In the distance, someone cried out in alarm. An Earth-class battle skill. That's second only to a Heaven-class battle skill. I never thought that I would be able to see it with my own eyes today. I heard that when a Heaven-class battle skill is used, the wind would surge and the clouds would surge. I wonder how strong an Earth-class battle skill is. The corners of Jen Chen's mouth curled up into a sneer as he closed his eyes. His right hand quickly danced as the light wind sword turned into a sky full of sword images, piling on top of each other as they rushed towards the incoming spear images. Ding, 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 ding. Following a series of sounds, Genshin and the middle-aged man had already exchanged over 100 blows in a single breath's time. The two's speed was so fast that it was impossible to see with the naked eye. The only difference was that the middle-aged man was using a battle skill to increase his speed, while Genshin was relying on his own sword. What speed? In the distance, the young man with the fiery, red, great sword on his back exclaimed, "His sword is too fast. Even I can't see it clearly. I can only rely on my intuition to catch it." The purple-robed man beside him also exclaimed, "What a fast sword! Just how does he have such speed? He's actually able to match Zhigu's battle skill." Qinji also exclaimed, "I'm also very curious. Even a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master who has reached the 6th cycle would find it difficult to achieve such speed. But he clearly doesn't have any wind-attributed saint force. Yet he can do it so easily. This is just too shocking. Just how is his arm supporting him?" 3 divine spear styles, second form. Divine dragon tail whip. The fiery red spear carried with it a fiery glow as it shot down towards Genshin. At the same time, an even more powerful pressure filled the air. It was as if a boulder was pressing down on Genshin's body, making it difficult for Genshin to even move. Genshin was not afraid in the slightest. Raising his light wind sword, he met the incoming spear head-on. Boom! A violent explosion rang out as the shockwave from the collision engulfed Jianchen. Jianchen's right arm trembled as he was pushed back a dozen meters. Between his legs, a 3-inch wide trench was formed. Even though they were both Earth-tier battle skills, the difference in power between the first and second forms was enormous. The third form, Divine Spear, breaks all laws. Just as Jianchen was about to stabilize himself, Zhigu's voice rang out again. Following that, a fiery red light suddenly appeared in Jianchen's line of sight and quickly grew larger. The sharp tip of the spear brought with it an extremely compressed energy as it closed in on him. Facing this spear, Jianchen felt as if he could not dodge it. It was as if this spear had already locked onto his battle skill, and the only way to deal with it was to meet it head-on. Jianchen slowly closed his eyes as he used his heart to sense Zhigu's exact location. At the same time, his spirit and the light wind sword in his hand formed an inseparable connection. The light wind sword began to emit a cold aura as it shot out, completely enveloping the light wind sword. In the next moment, a silver light flashed as the light wind sword left Jianchen's hand and shot forward at an unbelievable speed. Boom! A violent explosion rang out. The extremely compressed and violent energy at the tip of the spear lost its balance and exploded in midair. It was like a beautiful flower that was in full bloom. The red light that was constantly expanding and spreading in all directions was very eye-catching. The earth on the ground was sent flying as waves after waves of powerful energy spread out in all directions. The surrounding people were forced to retreat again and again until they were already 100 meters away. Both Jianchen and Zhigu had already been submerged by the powerful energy waves. After a while, when the energy waves dissipated, Jianchen and Zhigu's bodies appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Both of them looked perfectly fine, except for the fact that their clothes were a bit messy due to the energy waves. Jianchen's long hair had already broken free from its restraints and was fluttering wildly behind his head. In his right hand, he was still holding his 2-finger-wide and 4-foot-long silver-white sword. On the other side, Zhigu was still in his spear, holding position. His body was still in a running posture, as if he was frozen in place. His hair that originally reached his waist had already been cut off from his head, leaving only the part above his neck that was still there. Suddenly, a drop of blood appeared on Zhigu's neck and quickly spread out in a straight line. In the blink of an eye, Zhigu's neck looked as if he was wearing a red necklace. In the next moment, Zhigu's head fell from his neck. There was an uproar from the crowd. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock. In that moment, none of them knew what had happened. In their minds, after Zhigu used the last move of his Earth-tier battle skill, Jianchen would at least be heavily injured, if not killed. But they never thought that the final result would be so dramatic. Jianchen was standing there unscathed after being hit by the Earth-tier battle skill, while Zhigu's head was mysteriously cut off. How did Zhigu die? Just what happened in that moment? Everyone was very puzzled, and such thoughts kept circling in their minds. How dare you kill a member of my Jita clan? Die! After a moment of silence, a furious roar suddenly rang out. A young man of about 30 years of age charged towards Jianchen with a 1-meter-long sword in his hand. The sword emitted a surge of saint force that caused everyone's expression to change. What a powerful energy wave! Is he a Heaven Saint Master? A few of the Earth Saint Masters who thought they were not weak were shocked. Jianchen's expression also became serious. The sword in the young man's hand was actually a king weapon. In this place he actually saw 2 king weapons, and both of them were of the fire attribute. Die! The young man stared at Jianchen and swung his king weapon down. Chapter 311. The golden light collided with the ruler armament in the young man's hand, resulting in a deafening sound. An even more powerful ripple of energy formed a visible shockwave that expanded in all directions, causing those great Saint Masters 100 meters away to be thrown off their feet. Only Earth Saint Masters were able to stabilize themselves in front of this terrifying ripple of energy. The golden radiance dispelled the heaven-shaking attack of the King armament. Furthermore, the intense energy shockwave that erupted from the golden radiance pushed the young man back by more than 10 steps. When he regained his footing, his face was already somewhat pale. Ruler weapons were extremely powerful. Even Earth Saint Masters would be affected by the ripple of energy from the collision of 2 ruler weapons. The previous explosion had happened right in front of the young man's eyes, and the ripple of energy had already caused him to be slightly injured. This was because he was not very powerful. If he abandoned his ruler weapon, he would not even be as powerful as Jigu. The gaze of the youth holding the ruler's armament fell on the body of the yellow-clothed girl who was still shooting arrows not far away. He said one word at a time, "The king's weapon." The girl in yellow did not reply. She slowly put down the golden bow, but her left hand was still tightly holding the bow, ready to shoot a second arrow at any time. I never thought that another ruler weapon would appear, and it would be a longbow. The man with the 2-meter-long fiery red sword on his back exclaimed. He was extremely surprised by the appearance of a ruler weapon. Qin Ji, who was standing in the distance, let out a long sigh. His gaze immediately became complicated. He said in a low voice, "Second uncle, you actually guessed correctly. It really is a ruler weapon." The middle-aged man standing beside Qin Ji smiled and said, "I really never thought that another ruler weapon would appear. It really is unexpected. Now that we have 6 ruler weapons, we have a greater chance of defeating the magical beasts ahead. It's just a pity that Jigu is dead. We have lost a great help." Qin Ji chuckled and said, "Second uncle, although Jigu is dead, there is someone who is even more powerful than him. Overall, their strength has not decreased. Instead, it has increased." That's right. The appearance of the sun-moon bow made the young man who wanted to avenge Jigu hesitate. He stood there with a gloomy face and said, "Who are you?" "And who are you?" Jianchen said expressionlessly. Although he was very afraid of the king weapon, he did not show any fear. The young man glanced at Jianchen with disdain. Finally, he looked at the girl in yellow and said proudly, "I am Jid Wukang." In this trial space, Jed Wukong's name was known to almost everyone. He was one of the 5 great masters. Jianchen saw the disdain in Jed Wukong's eyes and sneered. "So you are Jed Wukong. You're just SOO. If you throw away your weapon, you are not even as good as the person who just died at my hands. You are courting death." Jianchen's words seemed to have touched Jed Wukong's bottom line, and he was enraged. He raised his king weapon and tried to slash at Jianchen, but just as he was about to raise his weapon, he stopped. He saw that the girl in yellow had drawn her sun-moon bow to its fullest, and a golden energy arrow was already aimed at him. Jed Wukong's face turned green, then white. Although they were both king weapons, the bow had an innate advantage in terms of long range. If the arrow was shot at him, even if he could successfully block it with his king weapon, the intense energy explosion would cause him to suffer for a while. To him, this was definitely a thankless task. The one who would suffer would definitely be him, because the golden arrow was simply too fast. He simply couldn't dodge it. For a moment, Jed Wukong was caught in a dilemma. Just as Jed Wukong was in a dilemma, a bell-like laughter sounded from afar. "Kikik, why is this place so lively? Who is fighting here?" They actually made such a big commotion. I can feel the earth shaking from far away. This little girl is so scared that her face turned pale. Following the voice, a girl in a pink dress slowly walked over from afar. Beside her, there were 2 expressionless, middle-aged men. This was a mature woman. She looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. Her entire body exuded an endless charm, as if every movement of hers had a charm that could captivate people's souls. Although the appearance of the woman in the red dress couldn't be said to be devastatingly beautiful, she was still a rare beauty in this world. Coupled with the charm emitted from her body, she was even more lethal than the devastatingly beautiful woman in yellow. She gave people an intense desire to conquer her. Hee hee hee. This little girl is from the Tianmu clan. My name is Lingzi. This is my first time here. Big brothers, please take care of me. The red dress girl giggled. Just this clear voice seemed to have an invisible magic, causing some people who were not firm in their hearts to gradually lose their focus. Tianmu Ling. Could she be one of the 5 great experts, Tianmu Ling? Someone exclaimed. There was almost no one who did not know the names of the 5 great experts, but there were not many who had personally seen them. Everyone immediately cast strange gazes at Tianmu Ling. Many of them were secretly surprised. They never thought that Tianmu Ling, one of the 5 great experts, would be such a charming girl. At the same time, she also had a bit of licentiousness. Tianmu Ling's gaze slowly looked around and finally landed on Jie Wukong, who was in a dilemma. She chuckled and said, "This little brother is so mighty. The sword in your hand must be an incredible saint weapon, right? It's actually emitting a terrifying aura that makes even this little girl feel apprehensive." As she said that, Tianmu Ling put on a very frightened expression and pretended to be very pitiful. Jie Wukong awkwardly smiled and used this opportunity to find a way out. He slowly put down the ruler weapon in his hand and proudly said, "This one is Jie Wukong. This saint weapon is the treasure of our Jie clan. It is said that it has been passed down from generation to generation. It is extremely powerful. If a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master were to wield this sword, they would be able to kill a Heaven Saint Master. Wow, it really is powerful." Tianmu Ling's face was filled with shock. Her white and tender fingers lightly covered her small mouth. When Jie Wukong saw her expression, he became even more complacent. "I wonder how these little brothers and big brothers are called?" Tianmu Ling looked at the remaining people. Her gaze landed on almost all of them with authority. "This one is Qin Ji." A young man in a white robe with golden embroidery cupped his hands and said with a warm smile on his face, "This one is Duge Feng." The young man with a fiery red sword on his back also cupped his hands and said coldly, "Wow, Qin Ji, Duge Feng, Jie Wukong. Your names are like thunder to this little girl's ears. I didn't expect that 3 of the legendary 5 masters would appear in front of this little girl's eyes. The 3 of you are so handsome that this little girl's heart is beating fast." Tianmu Ling was like an 18-year-old lively girl. Her face was filled with infatuation as if she had seen her idols. Her eyes were filled with little stars. "This little sister, how should I address you? Can you tell me?" Tianmu Ling looked at the yellow-clothed girl and giggled. "Humph." The yellow-clothed girl coldly snorted and turned her head away in disgust. Tianmu Ling didn't care. She still had a charming smile on her face as she looked at Jianqin and said, "This little brother can't be the last of the 5. Sure, Xiangran, right?" "This one is Jianqin." "I'm not sure Xiangran," Jianqin said expressionlessly. Tianmu Ling's face revealed a trace of surprise, but it quickly disappeared. She giggled and said, "Little brother Jianqin, you're so handsome. You've mesmerized this little girl. You have to take responsibility." Hearing this, even though he knew that Tianmu Ling was acting, Jianqin still felt cold sweat on his forehead. "Pervert!" The yellow-clothed girl gritted her teeth and spat out, "Oh, this little sister can't be jealous, right?" Tianmu Ling giggled as she stared at the yellow-clothed girl. She didn't care about the pervert's insults. The yellow-clothed girl's devastatingly beautiful face immediately turned red from anger. Her chest violently heaved up and down as she angrily glared at Tianmu Ling. She puffed up her cheeks and shouted, "Don't talk nonsense. Io, little sister's temper is quite big. That's not good. Girls should be a bit more gentle so that men will like them," Tianmu Ling said with a smile. The yellow-clothed girl was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Suddenly, the the sound of footsteps could be heard from afar. A 27 or 28-year-old youth wearing white clothes could be seen walking over. Jianqin quickly discovered the person who had come. When he saw the person's appearance, his eyes immediately became sharp. This person was actually Shi Xiangran. The difference between him and the other experts was that, including Tianmu Ling, they all had quite a few strong people by their side. However, Shi Xiangran, who was also one of the 5 experts, was actually alone. Shi Xiangran didn't notice Jianqin, but he immediately saw the brightly dressed, yellow-clothed girl standing in the crowd. His expression immediately changed. Jianqin's light wind sword immediately appeared in his hand. At this moment, he didn't care about revealing the secret of using the sword. The light wind sword left Jianqin's hand and turned into a silver light that shot toward Shi Xiangran's throat at an unbelievable speed. He had to kill Shi Xiangran before he activated his barrier. Otherwise, once Shi Xiangran activated his barrier, he would be in an invincible position. Even a king weapon wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Although Shi Xiangran didn't notice Jianqin, he saw the yellow-clothed girl at the same time as Jianqin did. He knew that the yellow-clothed girl's Sun Moon Bao was very powerful, so he didn't hesitate to activate his barrier. Just as the light wind sword was about to hit Shi Xiangran's throat, a transparent barrier was quietly released from Shi Xiangran's body. Bo! As soon as the barrier was released, it began to tremble. The light wind sword had already reached Shi Xiangran's throat, but before it could penetrate any further, it was bounced back by the barrier. Jianqin's eyes flashed, and the light wind sword suddenly shot out an even more powerful sword qi. Unwilling to give up, he once again fiercely stabbed towards Shi Xiangran's throat. The barrier around Shi Xiangran's body trembled a few times. Its defensive power was incomparably strong, and Jianqin's light wind sword was unable to break through it. As the barrier continued to expand, the light wind sword was pushed further and further away from Shi Xiangran. Jianqin let out a disappointed sigh as he helplessly recalled his light wind sword. Just a moment ago, he had been so close to killing Shi Xiangran. Seeing the light wind sword bounce back, Shi Xiangran's face became very ugly. He didn't even know when the light wind sword had gotten close to him. He immediately reached out to touch his neck and saw a drop of blood on his finger. Chapter 312. This chapter was supposed to be updated last night, but due to the rain and thunder last night, the internet was disconnected, so it could not be updated in time. Shi Xiangran's face turned pale without a trace of blood, and cold sweat flowed down his forehead. Only now did he realize that he had just walked through the gates of hell and almost fell into it. Anger rose from Shi Xiangran's heart, and he stared at Jianqin with resentment. The intense killing intent in his eyes was undisguised. Just now, if he had been a little slower in opening the barrier, he would have been a corpse now. Moreover, he would have died at the hands of someone much younger than him. For Shi Xiangran, who had always been regarded as a genius in his family, this was simply a great humiliation. If I don't smash you into meat paste, my name will be written upside down. Shi Xiangran's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared at Jianqin in a roaring voice. Then he immediately took out a fist-sized iron block from his space belt and threw it high into the sky. The iron block quickly enlarged in the air, and the light between heaven and earth suddenly dimmed. The base of the iron block had expanded to a huge object with a diameter of 200 meters, covering the sky above everyone's heads, and then with a surging energy wave, it fiercely pressed down from the sky. Dugu Feng, who was carrying a 2-meter-long fiery, red, great sword on his back, looked up at the iron block pressing down from the sky. His eyes flashed, and he immediately pulled out the 2-handed great sword on his back and slashed at the iron block in the sky with a wave of fire. When the wave of fire appeared, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose to a very terrifying level. Jed Wukong, who was holding a 1-meter-long greatsword, showed a look of disdain in his eyes. He snorted coldly, and his great sword also slashed at the iron block in the sky with a wave of fire. Suddenly, the already terrifying temperature in the surroundings rose to a whole new level. The surrounding plants withered instantly. Even the towering ancient trees withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. If it weren't for the fact that the plants here were living creatures with a lot of water and had a strong resistance to fire, it was likely that this place would have burned into a sea of fire. Qin Ji's face turned gloomy. An arm-length scimitar appeared in his hand. The entire blade of the scimitar flickered with a faint green light. The shape of the scimitar was very strange. The blade looked like a saw, and every tooth was incomparably sharp. Qin Ji held his sword with one hand and swung it at the treasure mountain seal that was pressing down from the sky. A 1-meter-long, faint green sword light shot toward the treasure mountain seal with immense power. At the same time, Tianmu Ling took out a long whip and chuckled. This little brother's temper is quite big. We didn't offend you, so you can't randomly throw things at people. With that, Tianmu Ling's hand trembled, and the whip in her hand left behind an afterimage in the air as it lashed towards the treasure mountain seal. Whoosh! A golden light flashed, and the yellow-clothed girl loosened her bowstring. An energy arrow completely condensed from pure saint force shot towards the treasure mountain seal with lightning speed. At this moment, the 5 great experts all made their moves. Each of them took out a terrifyingly powerful ruler armament. The only difference was that this time the 4 of them were dealing with one person, and the yellow-clothed girl, who also had a ruler armament. Sure, Zhuanran's treasure mountain seal expanded to a diameter of 200 meters as it smashed down. Such a large area seemed to have enveloped everyone below. He had lost his mind due to anger, and his unintentional actions had actually offended everyone present. By the time Shi Wanran understood, it was already too late. Boom! The 6 ruler armaments collided, creating a deafening sound. Immediately, the ground cracked and the earth shook. The unimaginably powerful shock waves swept out in all directions, including the 5 great experts and Jianqin. No one was able to stabilize their bodies. They quickly retreated, and with every step they took, they left a deep footprint in the ground. Ha! Following the deafening explosion, a shout suddenly rang out. Everyone released their saint force as much as they could, creating a defensive barrier to block the terrifying shockwaves. Among everyone present, only Shi Wanran, who was in the middle of the barrier, remained the most stable. His barrier's defense was extremely powerful, and although the shockwaves were powerful, they were far from being able to harm him. They could only push him back. The 4 ruler armaments returned to their master's hands, and the treasure mountain seal that had been attacked by the 5 ruler armaments was like a cannonball. It was sent flying high into the sky, but when it fell back down, it returned to Shi Zhuanran's hands. Violent energy ripples swept out in all directions, destroying the surrounding environment. Countless ancient trees were uprooted, and countless fragile weeds were pulverized. On the ground, a huge crack that was 1/2 meter wide appeared, and with it, as the center, it spread out in all directions like a spider web. A moment later, when the violent shock waves gradually calmed down, not a single blade of grass could be seen within 1,000 meters. There were no longer any trees. It was a complete mess. Shi Wanran, who was in the middle of the barrier, had an extremely gloomy expression on his face. He felt incomparably furious inside. He never thought that his impulsive actions would actually offend everyone present. In his heart, he attributed all of this to Jianqin. Little brother, you must be one of the 5 great experts, Shi Wanran. Ioyo, this little girl doesn't remember offending little brother in any way. Why did little brother want to kill me as soon as you arrived? Luckily, this little girl had some self-defense methods, and with the help of so many little brothers, I was able to barely survive this disaster. Otherwise, this little girl really would have been smashed into meat paste by little brother. Hearing Tianmu Ling's words, Shi Zhuanran's gloomy expression became even uglier. However, He seemed to have thought of something, and his expression immediately returned to normal. He cupped his hands apologetically to everyone and said, "I'm sorry, everyone. I was impulsive when I discovered an enemy, which was why I made such a stupid mistake. I am Sher Wanran. I don't want to become your enemy, so please don't mind me." Following that, Sher Wanran pointed his finger at Genshin and provoked, "Do you dare to come out and fight me? Do you only know how to hide behind a woman? What's the difference between you and a coward?" Sher Wanran's voice was filled with disdain for Genshin. Genshin's expression suddenly darkened. He stared at Sher Wanran with a sharp gaze. The intense, killing intent in his eyes was not concealed at all. Saint Force surged out from his right hand, quickly condensing into a silver-white sword. He then slowly walked towards Sher Wanran. Right now, he planned to use the Azure and Violet Sword Chi. Although he wasn't sure if the Azure and Violet Sword Chi would be able to break through Sher Wanran's barrier, it was Genshin's only hope. Seeing that Genshin actually wanted to fight Sher Wanran, the yellow-clothed girl standing to the side couldn't help but become anxious. She stepped in front of Genshin, blocking his path. At the same time, she stared at Sher Wanran with an angry expression and shouted, "Sher Wanran, you despicable and shameless bastard. If it weren't for the barrier protecting you, you would have already been killed by him. What qualifications do you have to challenge him? If you have the guts, throw away the barrier and fight with your own abilities." Sher Wanran's expression suddenly changed again because of the yellow-clothed girl's words. The yellow-clothed girl's words just happened to hit Sher Wanran's sore spot. He coldly stared at the yellow-clothed girl and angrily said, "You stinking woman!" "You!" The yellow-clothed girl was flustered. Her beautiful eyes were filled with anger as she stared at Sher Wanran. Her gaze was as if she wanted to cut Sher Wanran into 1,000 pieces. At this time, Qin Ji arrived between the two sides. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Friends, would you be willing to listen to what I have to say?" Without waiting for the two sides to speak, Qin Ji continued, "Since we are all gathered here, I presume you all already know the secret of this place. Thus, I will not waste time talking nonsense. There is indeed a cave ahead that was left behind by a predecessor. This is something that many of us here can testify to, so it is definitely not fake. However, there are several extremely powerful magic beasts guarding outside the cave. Even if we possess king armaments, it would still be difficult for us to charge in. Thus, I hope that you all can temporarily put aside your personal grudges and join forces. With everyone's strength, perhaps we might be able to defeat those magic beasts and enter the cave to obtain the things inside. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we will never be able to enter the cave. After all, there are only a dozen or so days left until the end of the elimination round. That's right. If we want to enter the cave, the only way is to join forces. Those magic beasts are extremely powerful." The one who spoke was Dugofeng, who was carrying a 2-meter-long fiery, red, great sword on his back. He was also one of the 5 experts with a king armament. "Ha ha ha, that seems to make some sense. Little brothers, why don't the two of you put aside your grudges for now? The most important thing right now is to enter the cave and obtain the things inside. I've heard that there are heaven-tier battle skills inside. TSK, TSK, TSK. A heaven-tier battle skill is such a huge temptation. Furthermore, as the cultivation cave of a senior expert, there definitely aren't just heaven-tier battle skills inside. Perhaps there are other precious items," said Tianuling. "Right now, there are only a dozen or so days left until the end of the elimination round. Once the time is up, all of us will be teleported out by a mysterious force. We won't be able to continue staying here. If everyone wants to enter the cave, then we can only join forces." The one who spoke was the purple-robed, middle-aged man standing beside Dugofeng. Hearing everyone's words, Genshin's eyes flickered with uncertainty. After hesitating for a while, he finally put away his light wind sword. In his heart, he had a strong desire for a heaven-tier battle skill. He had come to participate in the mercenary gathering for a heaven-tier battle skill because the Changyang Prefecture just happened to lack one. Chapter 313. Shi Xiangran coldly snorted. He stared at Jianqin with eyes filled with resentment and said, "Count yourself lucky. I'll let you off for now." With that, Shi Xiangran placed the seal of the treasure mountain, which had shrunk to the size of a fist, into his space ring. However, the barrier around him did not disperse and continued to protect him. Jianqin did not back down and retorted, "You better hide in your turtle shell forever. I'd like to see how long your turtle shell can last." Saint rulers had to pay a great price to leave behind their own barrier, yet it was actually called a turtle shell by someone else. Shi Xiangran's face paled in anger. When everyone heard what Jianqin had said, Qin Ji, Jetta, Wukong, Dugafeng, and Tianmu Ling's expressions became rather unnatural. "Ha ha ha! There's actually someone who calls the barrier energy left behind by a saint ruler a tortoiseshell. This is the first time I've heard of such a thing in my entire life. Little brother Jian sure has a personality." Tianmu Ling giggled. "All right, everyone, there's not much time left. Let's quickly come up with a plan. We already have 6 ruler armaments here, so we'll definitely be able to kill those powerful magical beasts. The most important thing right now is how to minimize our losses," said Qinji. Seeing that the battle had settled down, the people who had been pushed 1,000 meters away all returned. There were quite a few Earth Saint Masters among them. As expected of the 5 great experts, they're actually so powerful. What kind of treasure was that thing that was enlarged to 200 meters? It looked very powerful. I think I heard them mention something about ruler armaments. Strange. What are ruler armaments? Why have I never heard of them before? Many people were talking at once, but no one dared to make a ruckus. Their voices were very low. There are a total of 4 demonic beasts guarding the cave, and each of them is a rare variant species. They're very strong, and we need at least 2 people with king armaments to be able to fight one of them to a draw. Roughly speaking, if we want to suppress or even kill those demonic beasts, we need at least 3 people with king armaments to attack one of them. Right now, we have 6 king armaments here, so we can only deal with 2 demonic beasts. As for the remaining 2, we can only leave it to the others," Qinji said with a solemn expression. "We have quite a few Earth Saint Masters here. We can leave the remaining 2 magical beasts to them. Although they don't have ruler armaments, they have the advantage of numbers. With so many people, it should be possible to deal with 2 magical beasts." Dugafeng said. Qinji nodded. "That's right. Now we have to let everyone join forces. Only in this way can we break through the blockade of the 4 magical beasts." "I agree with this plan," Dugafeng said. "I agree too," Jed Wukong said. Out of the 5 experts, 3 of them had already agreed, so the remaining 2 had no objections. Brother Jianqin, may I ask what the 2 of you think? Qinji looked at Jianqin and the yellow-clothed girl. He didn't ask about the 4 people behind Jianqin. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that Jianqin and the yellow-clothed girl were the backbone of this group. "Of course I have no objections," Jianqin said with a smile. The yellow-clothed girl didn't say anything. She only nodded and agreed to this proposal. Seeing that the strongest people here had reached an agreement, Qinji's face revealed a trace of a happy smile. He swept his gaze around and said loudly to the surrounding people, "Everyone, the 5 of us have gathered here. We have already joined forces and are preparing to break into the cave. Those who are willing to move with us, please step forward. We will work together to prepare to kill the magical beasts guarding the cave. The things inside the cave will belong to whoever obtains them through luck." As soon as Qinji finished speaking, quite a few people stepped forward. After a few breaths of time, the number of people who stood out had reached more than 90%. There were even quite a few people who were only Great Saint Masters. Those who aren't Earth Saint Masters shouldn't go to their deaths. We only invite Earth Saint Masters to move with us. Digufong, who was carrying a 2-meter-long sword on his back, frowned and said in a low voice. He was very dissatisfied with the fact that even great Saint Masters wanted to join in the fun. Hearing this, the people who were only great Saint Masters could only helplessly retreat. Following their retreat, there were still over 70 people remaining. Every single one of them had the strength of an Earth Saint Master. There were even a few people who had injuries on their bodies. Their faces were sickly pale. All right, now that everyone has come over, let's discuss the plan. I suggest that we divide into 4 groups. Each group will deal with a magical beast alone. Does anyone have any objections? Qin said, "This suggestion is not bad. I agree. I also agree." Everyone began to speak one after another. Then, how should we divide the people in these 4 groups? Someone asked. Qin said with a smile, "Regarding this, I already have a plan in mind. The people in our circle will be divided into 2 groups. On average, each group will have over a dozen people. Your 70 people will be divided into 2 groups. On average, each group will have over 30 people. What does everyone think?" The people in Qin circle were naturally those who stood at the very center. At the same time, they also held ruler armaments. This included Genshin and the others. On the surface, it seemed like the people in the circle had a great advantage. In reality, this was not the case. This was because the people in the circle were basically the strongest existences present. Other than a few people, almost all of them could easily fight 1 against 3 or even more people. Now, let's divide the people into 2 groups. Qin's gaze swept past Genshin and the yellow-clothed girl. With a smile on his face, he said, "Genshin, I wonder if we can form a group." Genshin was clearly stunned by Qin's initiative. However, he quickly recovered and said with a smile, "To be able to be together with Brother Qin, this is our honor." "Little brother, you are the most handsome person here. Big sister also wants to be together with you. You won't refuse, right?" Tianmu Ling leisurely walked in front of Genshin. Her breath smelled like orchids. Genshin chuckled. His face didn't turn red, and his heart didn't skip a beat as he said, "Of course I have no objections. I just don't know if Brother Qin, I have no objections. Miss Tianmu Ling will join." Qin very elegantly smiled at Tianmu Ling. "Hee, little sister, I see that you don't have a good expression. Are you very unwilling to let big sister join you?" Little sister, don't worry. Big sister won't steal this handsome little brother from your hands." Tianmu Ling was very charming, and her smile was very beautiful. "Don't spout nonsense." The yellow-clothed girl was fuming. She angrily glared at Tianmu Ling, and it seemed as if her eyes were about to spit fire. Little sister, you have quite a temper. That's not good. Girls should be a bit gentler and more considerate. Only then will men like you. No man will like you if you act like this." Tianmu Ling didn't seem to get angry as she continued to chuckle. The yellow-clothed girl's reaction was very intense. She immediately pulled the sun-moon bow into a full circle and pointed the arrow at Tianmu Ling. She shouted, "If you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite." "Ah!" Tianmu Ling cried out in surprise. She dodged and hid behind Genshin. She said with a face full of fear, "Little sister, big sister is only joking with you. You can't be impulsive. Otherwise, little brother won't be able to keep his life." Genshin helplessly sighed and said, "Tianmu Ling, stop teasing her. Her temper isn't good." Little brother's words are too true. Her temper is indeed very bad." Tianmu Ling foolishly smiled. She then stopped teasing the yellow-clothed girl. The surrounding people looked at this scene as if they were watching a show. Many people revealed a faint smile on their faces, but no one said anything. Next, the 4 groups were quickly allocated. Genshin, the yellow-clothed girl, Tianmu Ling, and Qin were in the first group. Behind Tianmuling were two expressionless middle-aged men. They all had calm expressions and weren't weak. Qin had 3 middle-aged men beside him. Behind Jianqin were Senior N, Yun Zheng, the Zither Master, and Qin Shao. The second group was led by Shi Xiangran, Jie Wukong, and De Gafeng. Behind Jie Wukong and De Gafeng were a dozen middle-aged men. They were all experts from their respective families. Only Shi Xiangran was alone. He didn't have any followers, although these two groups didn't have the same number of people. Each group had 3 people with ruler armaments. They were the 2 strongest groups. The last 2 groups were made up of over 70 Earth Saint Masters. Each group had over 30 people, but because they were a ragtag bunch, they didn't have the slightest experience of working together. As a result, their battle prowess was the weakest of the 4 groups. Let's all rest up today. Adjust to your peak condition. We'll set off tomorrow morning. Afterward, everyone began to set up tents. Because the previous battle had cleared out an area of 1,000 meters, there was enough space. Although the great Saint Masters couldn't work together with everyone, not a single one of them left. They all chose to set up camp in the outermost area to watch the rare battle. There were even a few people who planned on sneaking in. After the tents were set up, Jianqin called Senior N, Yun Zheng, Zither Master, and Qin Shao into the tent. He said, "Do you plan on coming with us or temporarily leaving? But I have to remind you that although the magical beasts guarding the cave are strong, they aren't the greatest threat. The greatest threat still comes from their own kind. Outside, although we seem to be working together to deal with the magical beasts, once we successfully enter the cave, our alliance will be torn apart in an instant. An intense battle will occur. Jianqin, we all know this. I'm too weak. Even if I go in, I won't be able to help you. Moreover, the shock waves from the battle between Earth Saint Masters are already hard for me to bear. So I'll stay outside and wait for your return." Qin Shao didn't hesitate at all and took the initiative to leave. Qin Zhao's withdrawal was within Jianqin's expectations. Even if Qin Shao insisted on going in, Jianqin would do everything in his power to dissuade him. "What about you 3? Jianqin looked at the remaining 3. "I'll stay," Zither Master expressionlessly said. Senior N and Yun Zheng looked at each other. After a slight hesitation, Senior N spoke first. "Brother Jianqin, I'll go in with you. Although I'm not as strong as you, it's not bad to go in and increase your morale." Chapter 3:14. On the morning of the second day, everyone packed up their tents and formed a long line as they walked towards the depths of the forest. Perhaps the stone Xiangran was frightened by Jianqin's divine sword manipulation divine ability, but he still continued to move forward, not daring to lower his guard in the slightest. On the road, Qin opened his mouth to explain, "There are a total of 4 magical beasts guarding the cave, all of which belong to a different species. Each of them is very powerful. They are the flying spirit snake, the purple gold thunder lion, the earthworm, and the pangolin emperor. According to our experience from fighting them these past few days, we have determined that their strength is almost the same, but they all have different innate abilities. The flying spirit snake has the ability to fly and has a very strong poison. Once it takes to the sky, it will be very difficult to deal with. The purple gold thunder lion has a layer of purple scales on its body. Its defense is not bad, and its attack is very strong. It can spit out lightning, and its entire body is covered with a layer of powerful lightning energy. It is best not to approach its body. On the other hand, the Deity dragon is a mutated Deity dragon. Its defense is extremely strong, and its attack power is not comparable to the violet gold thunder lion. Its only weakness is its slow speed. To people with wind saint force, the Deity dragon is less of a threat to them than the other 3. As for the last pangolin emperor, it's a bit of a headache. The pangolin emperor's attack is the weakest among the 4 beasts, but it's also the most troublesome. Not only is it very fast, but it can also instantly drill into the ground and escape, avoiding all attacks on the ground. The Pangolin Emperor's movement is completely silent. There's no trace at all. It can appear behind or under your feet to attack you at any time. Although its attack power is not as good as the previous 3 beasts, it's still very difficult to guard against. Speaking of the Pangolin Emperor, Qin-Ji's eyebrows tightly wrinkled. Obviously, he had suffered many losses at the hands of the Pangolin Emperor. Qin-Ji, then which magical beast do you think we should deal with? Jianqin asked while walking. Of course, it's the flying spirit snake. One of the 3 king weapons in our team is a longbow. Once the flying spirit snake flies into the sky, we can shoot it with arrows. The other weapon is a whip that can restrict the flying spirit snake's movements. It can even bind its body and prevent it from flying. These 2 weapons are the bane of the flying spirit snake, Qin-Ji said without hesitation. Jianqin pondered for a moment before agreeing with Qin-Ji's suggestion. That's right, the flying spirit snake poses a much smaller threat to us compared to the other magic beasts. Let's choose the flying spirit snake then. Hearing the conversation between Qin-Ji and the others, De Gufeng turned his head and said, "The earthworm's defense is very strong. In addition, its strength is also not weak. I'm afraid an ordinary Earth Saint's attack won't be able to injure it. Only a king weapon can injure it. Naturally, we will deal with it. As for the purple gold Thunder Lion and the Pangolin Emperor, let the 2 teams behind us deal with them." Soon, everyone finished their discussion. The Pangolin Emperor and the purple gold Thunder Lion, which were the most difficult to guard against, naturally fell into the hands of the last 2 teams. Although some people were very dissatisfied with this, they had nothing to say. The flying spirit snake had the ability to fly. Once it was in the air, the people on the ground could only stare at it helplessly. Moreover, the flying spirit snake could also use its poison to attack the people on the ground. For this kind of magic beast, leaving it in the hands of Jianqin, who had a long bow and a long whip, was the best choice. As for the Deity dragon, there were quite a few people who vaguely understood the situation. Any creature that had the word dragon in its name was not simple. Perhaps the Deity dragon's defense was just as De Gufeng had said. A normal Earth Saint Master would not be able to cause any harm to it. And for such a powerful magical beast to be in the hands of a team with 3 ruler armaments, it seemed reasonable. Although the Pangolin Emperor and the purple gold Thunder Lion were not easy to deal with, the remaining 2 teams had a very big advantage. That was the number of people. 30 Earth Saint Masters against a magic beast should not be too difficult. After walking for 10 kilometers, the group finally stopped. There was still a mess left behind from the battle. Suddenly, several loud beast roars came from the front, shaking the earth and deafening the ears. Following that, 3 huge magic beasts appeared in front of the group. One of them was a python with a body as thick as a water tank. Its head was larger than an adult's body. On its back, there were 3 sets of huge black wings. It was the flying spirit snake. Beside the flying spirit snake was a ferocious beast that looked like a lion. Its body was even larger than an elephant. Its body was covered with fine purple gold scales. From time to time, lightning would jump around its body. It was the purple gold Thunder Lion. Beside the purple gold Thunder Lion was a creature that looked like a gecko. It was 1 meter tall and 10 meters long. It relied on its 4 short legs to support itself on the ground. Its body was also covered in yellow scales, densely covering its entire body. When these 3 magic beasts appeared, the entire area was enveloped by an extremely powerful aura. It made everyone feel as if a large rock was pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to breathe. "Everyone, let's go together. The Pangolin Emperor is very likely to be hiding on the ground." "Be careful!" De Gufeng shouted. He pulled out the fiery, red, great sword from his back and rushed towards the Deity dragon. Beside him, Jed Wukong, Shi Xiangran, and a dozen middle-aged men also followed behind. At this moment, apart from the team that was dealing with the Pangolin Emperor, the other 3 teams simultaneously attacked the 3 magic beasts. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, the yellow-clothed girl held the sun-moon bow and shot at the flying spirit snake. Boom! When the golden arrow came into contact with the flying spirit snake's body, it exploded. The flying spirit snake's body shook for a moment before stabilizing. On its huge body, there was only a bloody hole. The flying spirit snake was immediately enraged. It let out an ear-piercing hiss as it twisted its body and slid towards the yellow-clothed girl. Qin-ji took out a 1-meter-long, strangely shaped scimitar and said in a deep voice, "Use a long whip to bind its body." Tianmu Ling's face became serious. With a wave of her hand, the whip in her hand turned into a phantom as it lashed towards the flying spirit snake. While it was still in the air, the whip quickly lengthened until it became a 100-meter-long rope that tightly bound the flying spirit snake's wings together, preventing it from flying into the air. "Let's go!" Qin-ji shouted as he led the 3 middle-aged men towards the flying spirit snake. At the same time, Genshin's body left behind an afterimage as he approached the flying spirit snake with a light wind sword in his hand. Senior and Yunzheng also took out their saint weapons and followed closely behind Genshin. Chapter 315. Ah! The battle lasted for a moment, and then a painful scream came from the field. A middle-aged man was bitten by a huge rat head that popped out of the ground and dragged into the ground, disappearing. That's the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor has appeared. Everyone be careful of the ground. Everyone was shocked as they stared at the ground with a serious expression. At this moment, behind a half-naked man, a fat golden rat leaped out from the ground and bit the man's upper body. "Careful! The Pangolin Emperor has appeared. Quickly attack it. Don't let it hide underground." As soon as the Pangolin Emperor emerged from the ground, everyone began to shout out in alarm. Immediately, several people began to attack the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor was extremely fast. It bit down on the man's upper body and immediately dragged him into the ground. However, there were still 3 saint weapons with powerful saint force that struck its body, only to create some sparks. The Pangolin Emperor was also a scaled magical beast. Its body was covered in a thick layer of golden scales. Although its defense was not as strong as the earthworm, it was still not something a normal Earth Saint Master could break through. A sharp earth spike instantly pierced out from the ground, piercing deeply into a person's crotch from below, making it impossible for the person to guard against. Ah! The person let out a miserable cry as he stabbed his sword into the ground with a layer of fire attributed Saint Force, in an attempt to injure the Pangolin Emperor. However, the ground was filled with mud and the Pangolin Emperor had already changed its position. An intense purple light flashed and illuminated the entire area. On the other side, the violet gold thunder lion spat out a bolt of blue lightning that was as thick as an arm. The person closest to it was charred black and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. More than a dozen people surrounded the purple gold thunder lion and attacked at the same time. Clanging sounds rang out as the saint weapons struck the purple gold thunder lion's body. Sparks and blood flew everywhere. Although the purple gold thunder lion's defense wasn't weak, it couldn't withstand so many people. In just a short while, it had already suffered several wounds. The violet gold thunder lion roared again and again. Its sharp claws continuously clawed at the people surrounding it. Thick bolts of lightning shot out from its mouth, and each bolt accurately hit a person. No one could dodge. Not long after, more than 10 of the 30 Earth Saint Masters surrounding the violet gold thunder lion had already been hit by the lightning. They were charred black and could no longer get up. There were also 3 people whose chests were pierced by the violet gold thunder lion's claws and died on the spot. There were quite a few people who were injured. The purple gold thunder lion's attack power was extremely strong, and the team that faced it could be said to have suffered the most casualties. On the other side, The two groups that were fighting the flying spirit snake and Deity dragon were much more relaxed. These two groups each had 3 ruler weapons, and their strength was not bad. Not a single person was injured. Every time the ruler weapons in Qin Ji's group's hands struck the Deity dragon's body, they could easily break through the Deity dragon's scales and cause it heavy injuries. In just a short while, the yellow Deity dragon had completely turned into a blood dragon. The flying spirit snake's fate was not much better than the Deity dragon's. Its wings were tightly bound by Tianmu Ling's whip. Although Tianmu Ling was still unable to use the whip's true power, the strength of a ruler weapon was still not something the flying spirit snake could contend against. With its wings bound, the flying spirit snake's strength was greatly reduced. Even its movements were greatly affected. It could only use 60% of its battle prowess. Every time the ruler weapon in Qin Ji's hand struck the flying spirit snake's body, it would leave a 1-meter-long wound on its body. The flying spirit snake was in so much pain that it would constantly roar. The yellow-clothed girl stood in the distance and constantly shot arrows. One after another, the energy arrows shot towards the flying spirit snake's head, creating a series of violent explosions. The flying spirit snake's head shook incessantly, causing blood to flow out. Jianqin and the other middle-aged men surrounded the flying spirit snake's body and constantly attacked it. The flying spirit snake's huge body was constantly covered in wounds. Although the magical beasts were extremely powerful, there were just too many people attacking them at the same time. Moreover, every single one of them was at least an Earth Saint Master. Even with their powerful strength, it was still difficult for the flying spirit snake and the Deity dragon to endure the attacks of the 3 ruler weapons. Their injuries were much more severe than the violet gold thunder lions. Currently, only the pangolin emperor was using its advantage to continuously ambush the group and was still in good condition. The flying spirit snake's body violently writhed. The bound wings on its back never stopped struggling. Moreover, as its injuries became more and more severe, its temperament became even more berserk. The strength of its needles constantly increased. Tianmu Ling's face was filled with seriousness. She gritted her teeth, and a layer of fine sweat had already appeared on her forehead. She was using all of her strength to maintain the whip that bound the flying spirit snake's wings. Suddenly, the flying spirit snake let out a hoarse roar. Then, it spat out a mouthful of highly corrosive poisonous fog. It quickly spread in all directions. When the poisonous fog came close to everyone's body, their clothes were immediately corroded at a speed visible to the naked eye. This poison is very poisonous. It can penetrate the defense of Saint Force. Once poisoned, it will only take 2 hours to take the life of an Earth Saint Master. Everyone quickly retreat. Qin Ji immediately shouted. The 3 middle-aged men and senior N's group immediately retreated out of the poison's range. Within the range of the poison's range, one's line of sight became very blurry. It was simply impossible to see anything from the outside. A transparent barrier enveloped Qin Ji. Inside the barrier, Qin Ji completely gave up on defense. Holding his blade with both hands, he leapt high into the air and viciously chopped down on the flying spirit snake's vital point. Rip! A terrifying wound over a meter long appeared on the flying spirit snake's vital point. Afterwards, Qin Ji's hands did not stop moving. Following the previous wound, Qin Ji viciously stabbed his blade into the flying spirit snake's vital point, all the way to the hilt. The flying spirit snake let out an ear-piercing shriek. Its huge body began to churn violently. An afterimage flashed past, and the snake's tail fiercely slammed into the barrier protecting Qin Ji. Although Qin Ji wasn't injured, his entire body was sent flying far away by the impact. At this moment, Qin Ji's pupils abruptly shrank. Within the poisonous fog that covered the sky, he seemed to vaguely catch a glimpse of a purple and a green light. Ayo! In the next moment, a miserable shriek came from the flying spirit snake's mouth. Due to the dense poison's range of vision, no one was able to clearly see what was happening inside. However, they could clearly feel the ground around them trembling violently. The flying spirit snake continued to let out miserable shrieks within the poisonous fog. Its voice was filled with pain. The poisonous fog that enveloped the area also began to churn, as if a flood dragon was stirring up clouds and raining rain. Covered in blood, Jianqin retreated from the other side of the poisonous fog. His clothes had already been corroded by the poison and were completely melted. Furthermore, his body was covered in green poison. Although the yellow-clothed girl and the others were standing in front of him, they could not see Jianqin because of the layer of poisonous fog that could not be seen with the naked eye. Jianqin immediately took out a set of clothes and wiped off the poison on his body as quickly as possible. Then he took out a new set of clothes and quickly put them on. After everything that had happened last night, Jianqin walked around the poisonous fog with a smile on his face and rejoined the group. At this time, the violently churning flying spirit snake finally calmed down. A gentle breeze blew and dispersed the poisonous fog, revealing the scene inside. When everyone saw the scene in front of them, each and every one of them was dumbstruck. Their faces were filled with shock. Even Qinji's eyes were filled with astonishment. The flying spirit snake's huge body was lying on the ground. From its 7 inches, it was cut into 2 halves. Bright red blood flowed out like a fountain. Its heart, which was the size of an adult's head, was also broken into 2 halves. At this moment, it was lying on the ground, weakly struggling. Although it was not dead yet, it was not far from death. Furthermore, the magic core that was originally in its heart had disappeared without a trace. Qinji's mind couldn't help but recall the indistinct purple and green light that he had seen a moment ago. Immediately he understood. His gaze towards Jianqin immediately changed greatly. However, he tactfully did not say anything and suppressed all the doubts in his heart. At this time, the earthworm also let out a mournful cry. It fell to the ground, covered in wounds. Its head had already been smashed into meat paste by Shi Jingran's seal of the Treasure Mountain. Even its body was covered in hundreds of large and small wounds. The flying spirit snake and the earthworm had already been killed. The remaining violet gold thunder lion was still alive and kicking. Although its body was also covered in wounds, the number of fatal wounds were pitifully small. The violet gold thunder lion was a strange creature. Its strength was much stronger than other magical beasts of the same level. Ordinary Earth Saint Masters could only cause a few light wounds to it. The pangolin emperor was the most intact one. It was still moving up and down on the ground, playing a game of hide-and-seek with a few people on the ground. Its elusive nature made it impossible to guard against. Once it burrowed into the ground, it would instantly disappear without leaving behind a single trace. It was an extremely troublesome sight. The 2 groups dealing with the violet gold thunder lion and the pangolin emperor had suffered heavy casualties. Among them, the group dealing with the violet gold thunder lion had already lost more than a dozen people. Many of them had suffered heavy injuries, but they still stubbornly fought the violet gold thunder lion. As for the group dealing with the pangolin emperor, 7 of them had been swallowed alive. More than a dozen people had suffered injuries of varying degrees, but they had not harmed the pangolin emperor in the slightest. The violet gold thunder lion is too strong. Quickly come and help us. We can't hold on for much longer. Quickly come and help us deal with the pangolin emperor. Many people saw the flying spirit snake and the earthworm dragon being killed and cried out for help with joy. After dealing with the earthworm dragon, Dugafeng and the others collected its monster core. They did not pay any attention to the 2 groups that were still fighting. Instead, they quickly led the group out of the forest. Don't worry about them. Let's go. We can't fall behind. The cave is just ahead. Qinji also called out to Jianqin and the others. He led the 3 middle-aged men and chased after Dugafeng and the others. As for the Class 5 flying spirit snake's corpse, they did not even look at it. Jianqin also did not care about the flying spirit snake's corpse. He called out to the group and chased after them into the depths of the forest. After sprinting for 2 kilometers, Jian Chen followed Qin Ji and finally entered cave. The cave was very deep. Above the corridor, there were luminous pearls emitting white light hanging at intervals. The walls of the tunnel were flat and smooth. It was obvious that someone had used absolute strength to forcefully carve out the tunnel. Boom! A loud sound came from the front of the tunnel. The entire tunnel shook violently. Jian Chen followed behind the yellow-clothed girl, Tianmu Ling and Signorin. The 5 of them quickly approached the front and quickly met up with De Gufeng and the others. Seeing Jian Chen and the others enter, the stone statue, standing in the middle of the group, immediately activated a barrier to protect itself. In front of the group, a stone door blocked their path. Chapter 3:16. Don't care what kind of door it is. Let me break it. De Gufeng took a large step forward and ruthlessly punched the stone door. Following a muffled sound, the stone door still stood there without budging. Only a little bit of dust fell down. Seeing this scene, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. Even De Gufeng was taken aback as he muttered, "Is this really a stone door?" De Gufeng was very clear about the strength of his punch. Not to mention a stone door, even a steel door would have a hole in it. However, the stone door in front of him was not damaged at all. Heavens, is this still a stone door? It's actually so hard. What kind of material is this stone door made of? It's actually so hard. This stone door is definitely not an ordinary object. Everyone started to discuss. Who cares what it is? Anything that dares to block my path is destined to be destroyed. De Gufeng coldly snorted. He extended his hand and pulled out the fiery red, great sword on his back. He planned to use his king armament. Seeing that De Gufeng actually used his powerful king armament, the others all retreated, afraid that they would be affected. The king armament in De Gufeng's hand emitted raging flames. Following a loud shout, he fiercely punched the stone door with an enormous force that caused everyone to tremble. Boom! A deafening sound rang out. An entire cave violently shook. Everyone's body swayed, and they were unable to stand steadily. After a while, when everything calmed down, everyone opened their eyes wide again. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The stone door was actually standing there without any damage. What kind of material is this stone door made of? Isn't it a little too hard? Tianmu Ling, who was standing behind Jian Chen, covered her mouth and stuttered. Her face was filled with shock. At this moment, even De Gufeng was unable to maintain the calmness on his face. He was instantly moved. Such an unremarkable-looking stone door was actually able to withstand the attack of a king armament without being damaged in the slightest. It was truly unbelievable. Qin Ji, who was wearing a luxurious robe, walked in front of the stone door. He extended his hand and touched the thick stone door. After muttering to himself for a while, he said to everyone, "Once we break this stone door, we can truly enter the cave. Let those with king armaments attack at the same time. I don't believe that this stone door can withstand our combined attacks." "That's right. This should be the best method right now," Jetta Wukong softly said. He, that's good. Little brothers, you have to use your strength later. I am also willing to help. Whether we can break this thick stone door or not will depend on you." Tianmu Ling, who was emitting a mature charm, chuckled. She was extremely charming. Immediately after, she walked in front of Jian Chen and charmingly looked at him. She lightly smiled and said, "Little brother Jian Chen, do you want to give it a try?" Jian Chen bitterly smiled and shook his head. He said, "I don't have a king armament, so my attack power is extremely weak. Moreover, the width of this passage is limited, so it can't hold too many people. I won't hinder everyone." As soon as Jian Chen finished speaking, a great beast's roar rang out from outside. Everyone's face changed when they heard that. This is the sound of the purple-gold thunder lion. Moreover, there are dense footsteps. Damn it, they actually came over and even lured the purple-gold thunder lion over. Everyone, let's hurry up and attack, Qin said in a deep voice. They didn't hesitate at all. Dugu Feng, Jieru Wukong, Shi Gran, Qin and Tian Wuling all stood in front of the stone door. They all took out their king armaments and began to charge up, preparing to unleash their strongest attack. At the same time, a few transparent barriers suddenly appeared and enveloped them. This scene shocked Jianqin. He didn't think that these people would have Saint Ruler's barrier within them. His gaze then turned to the yellow-clothed girl. He saw her standing 10 meters away with her bow fully drawn. What was different was that she didn't have a barrier protecting her. He didn't know whether it was because there was no Saint Ruler's barrier within her or because she didn't use it at all. At this moment, other than the 6 people who used their king armaments, everyone else retreated far away. 6 king armaments, attacking at full strength at the same time, created a storm of energy that was enough to injure an Earth Saint Master. Attack! With that order, the 6 people unleashed their strongest attacks at the same time. A golden arrow tore through the bow and shot towards the stone door with lightning speed. However, the Treasure Mountain seal in Shi Xiangran's hand didn't enlarge. It remained the size of a fist. He viciously smashed the seal towards the stone door. The others also swung their king armaments and attacked the stone door in unison. Boom! An even more oppressive sound rang out, and the surging energy formed a terrifying energy storm in the narrow cave. It surged out of the cave, and the entire cave shook violently, as if it was about to collapse due to the heavy load. Jianqin and the other Earth Saint Masters all stuck close to the walls of the cave, firmly stabilizing their bodies. At the same time, Saint Force surged out of their bodies and formed a layer of defense around them. After a long while, when the energy waves gradually calmed down, the 6 people holding king weapons were pushed back more than 10 meters by the energy waves. However, they were protected by the enchantment, so they were not affected at all. Only the yellow-clothed girl's face was slightly pale. When they looked at the stone door again, it was already covered with cracks, but it hadn't shattered. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The powerful defense of the stone door had exceeded everyone's imagination. They never thought that it would be able to withstand the combined attack of 6 king armaments and still not completely shatter. However, what made everyone rejoice was that the cave was extremely sturdy. It had withstood such a powerful attack. It actually didn't collapse. Again, Jieru Wukong roared, unwilling to admit defeat. Following that, the 6 people attacked at the same time. This time, they attacked the stone door with even more power than before. With a violent explosion, countless rocks shot out in all directions. The entire cave reverberated with the sound of the explosion. The 6 people's second attack had finally shattered the stone door that was countless times harder than steel. The moment the stone door shattered, Dugu Feng, Jieru Wukong, Shi Gran, Qin and Tian Wuling endured the violent energy wave and forcefully charged towards the back of the stone door. They had the protection of a barrier, so they didn't have to worry about being injured by the energy wave at all. Sensing their movements, Jianqin's eyes flashed. He also endured the violent energy wave and quickly charged towards the back of the stone door. As he moved forward, Jianqin's body constantly twisted to reduce the resistance of the energy wave. In the end, he actually managed to enter the back of the stone door at the same time as the 5 people who were originally in front of him. Behind the stone door was a spacious space. The energy wave outside didn't have much of an effect on this space. Right in front of them, on a high platform, there was a wooden box quietly lying there. It looked very ordinary and didn't have the slightest bit of peculiarity. Seeing the wooden box, Dugu Feng, Shi Gran, Jieru Wukong, and Qin didn't hesitate to rush towards the wooden box. Along the way, the saint weapons in their hands continuously attacked the people around them, trying to slow them down. However, they all had the protection of a barrier, So although the saint weapons were powerful, they couldn't cause any harm to them in a short period of time. A green whip shadow flashed by and instantly overtook the 4 people who were rushing towards the wooden box. It tightly bound the wooden box and then pulled it back. The 4 people immediately reached a tacit agreement and attacked the wooden box at the same time. Pow! The wooden box shattered, and a book made of white beast skin fell from the sky. Due to the impact of the energy wave that had yet to dissipate, the book kept flipping in the air. The 4 of them flew up at the same time. Their 4 hands reached out to grab the book that was falling from the air. They all wanted to snatch the book away from them. Tianmu Ling stood in place without moving a single step. Her wrist shook, and the whip turned into a whip shadow that lashed towards the 4 people. At the same time, the other end of the whip was like a nimble little snake that coiled towards the book. At this moment, the 4 people seemed to be connected. Holding their saint weapons, they attacked Tianmu Ling's whip at the same time. Although the whip was also a saint weapon, how could it fight against the 4 people? It was immediately suppressed. At this moment, the 4 people had already arrived in front of the book made of white beast skin. Their 4 hands shot out like lightning, and each of them grabbed a part of the book before suddenly pulling it to their side. Chi! The link to the book was broken, turning into a dozen broken pages that scattered in the air. In addition, there was still a small remnant of energy wave that turned into a gust of wind that blew in all directions. The 4 people raised their hands and began to collect the broken pages that filled the air. At the same time, Genshin's body turned into a white blur as he charged towards the 2 broken pages that were flying towards him. Then, with lightning speed, he grabbed the 2 broken pages and continued to charge towards the next broken page. Dugu Feng quickly grabbed the 2 broken pages, then instantly approached the next broken page. Just as he was about to grab it, a figure suddenly flashed in front of him. Genshin's body had already turned into a blur as he swept past him and grabbed the broken page that he was about to grab. Dugu Feng was stunned. His face was instantly covered with a layer of killing intent, and his eyes became incomparably sharp. After the 4 people fought with all their strength, the dozen broken pages were all snatched by the 6 people in the blink of an eye. Among them, Tianmu Ling had 2, Genshin had 4, Dugu Feng had 4, Jetta Wukong had 3, Shi Xiangran had 2, and Qinji had 4. In total, there were 19 broken pages. At this moment, Shi Xiangran quickly charged towards Genshin with the barrier. The treasure mountain seal in his hand was still the size of a fist as he smashed it towards Genshin's head. Daring to kill my people, today will be the day you die. No one has ever dared to steal from me. At the same time, Jetta Wukong and Dugu Feng also charged towards Genshin. The saint weapons in their hands emitted a monstrous energy wave. Chapter 317. The fact that Shi Xiangran, Jetta, Wukong, and Dugu Feng were all attacking him at the same time had truly surprised Genshin. His face immediately became serious. The 3 of them were protected by a barrier, making it extremely difficult to injure them. Moreover, they also had king weapons in their hands. If he were to be hit by a king weapon, even with Genshin's strong body, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Even if he didn't die, he would be left with half his life. In this situation, if Genshin were to be injured, Shi Xiangran and the other 2 would definitely not let him go. If that happened, he would never be able to leave this cave. Genshin's eyes suddenly became crazed. Right now, he could only use his final trump card to fight for his life. A purple and green light suddenly appeared on the light wind sword. Genshin did not retreat, but instead charged forward. Without the slightest fear, he charged towards Shi Xiangran. The light wind sword pierced towards Shi Xiangran's barrier. Right now, Genshin had placed all of his hopes on the purple and green sword chi. Success or failure depended on it. The purple and green sword chi was currently Genshin's strongest attack. Seeing that Genshin had actually taken the initiative to charge towards him, Shi Xiangran's eyes revealed a trace of excitement. With his barrier protecting him, Even a king weapon would not be able to break through his defense, let alone Jianchen. Thus, Shi Xiangran disdained Jianchen's attack. At this moment, Shi Xiangran felt as if the pages of the heaven-tier battle skill were already in his hands. Thinking up to this point, Shi Xiangran's grip on the seal of Baoshan tightened. When he got close to Jianchen, he directly used the seal of Baoshan as if it was a rock and fiercely smashed it towards Jianchen's head. When the light wind sword came into contact with the barrier around Shi Xiangran's body, Jianchen's eyes were filled with expectation as a small hole was melted into the barrier. Seeing this scene, Jianchen was ecstatic. Without any hesitation, the light wind sword pierced through Shi Xiangran's throat with lightning speed. Shi Xiangran's entire body stiffened as he abruptly stopped moving. He stared blankly at the light wind sword that had pierced through his throat. His face was filled with disbelief. The seal of Baoshan that he had been holding in his hand was also abruptly stopped in midair. This isn't possible. Shi Xiangran's eyes were wide open as he spat out a few words with great difficulty. He was unable to accept the scene in front of him. Dugofeng and Jetta Wukong, who had been attacking Jianchen at the same time, also came to a stop. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they stared at the light wind sword that had pierced through Shi Xiangran's throat. Their faces were filled with shock. They had experienced firsthand just how strong a barrier was. Even a Heaven Saint Master would need to use their full strength to break through it. But at this moment, the barrier protecting Shi Xiangran had actually been easily pierced through by Jianchen's light wind sword. It had not even stopped him in the slightest. It was as weak as tofu. How could they not be shocked? On the other side, Qin Ji and Tianmu Ling were also shocked as they looked at this scene. Their hearts were in turmoil. Tianmu Ling covered her mouth as she stared at Jianchen and Shi Xiangran in a daze. At this time, the yellow-clothed girl also entered the cave and saw Shi Xiangran's throat being pierced by the light wind sword. Her expression froze for a moment before her eyes widened in shock. Her face was filled with disbelief and disbelief. He actually broke through Shi Xiangran's barrier. The yellow-clothed girl's heart surged like waves. At this moment, she did not know what she was feeling. Was it because of Shi Xiangran's death? Or was it because of Jianchen's sudden display of strength? Jianchen's eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at the light wind sword that had pierced through Shi Xiangran's throat. Finally, a large stone was lifted from his heart. When the azure and violet sword spirits had just awakened, they had continuously displayed their strength. Jianchen had also relied on the azure and violet sword spirits to kill Earth Saint Masters with his strength as a great Saint Master. And now, the azure and violet sword spirits did not disappoint him. They were actually able to easily break through the barrier that even a king armament could not do anything to. As a result, the other people who were protected by the barrier were much less of a threat to him. Although a king armament was very powerful, it was at most a weapon that could unleash powerful attacks. As long as they didn't let the king armament hit them, and didn't clash with the king armament head-on, the king armament would be no different from an ordinary saint armament in their hands. Shi Liangran's life force was rapidly draining away. He was still staring at this scene in a daze. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Without his support, the spirit formation around him was also rapidly fading away. In the end, it disappeared. With a twist of his wrist, Jianchen used the light wind sword to pierce through Shi Xiangran's throat and pulled out the light wind sword. At the same time, Jianchen reached out to grab Shi Xiangran's space ring and the seal of the treasure mountain from his right hand. He then continued to rush towards Jetta Wukong, who was closest to him. Jianchen's previous actions had already made Jetta Wukong, Dugofeng, and Jianchen's enemies. Jianchen would definitely not let go of his enemies. Furthermore, they had the heaven-tier battle skill that Jianchen coveted. Seeing Jianchen rushing towards him, Jetta Wukong's expression changed greatly. Before the fight for the heaven-tier battle skill, he did not put Jianchen in his eyes at all. However, Seeing how Jianqin had easily destroyed his barrier and killed Shi Xiangran had given him a huge shock. Now he was not so naive as to think that no one would be able to hurt him with the barrier protecting him. Jie Wukong's figure rapidly retreated. At the same time, the 1-meter-long greatsword in his hand began to burn with a layer of raging flames as it slashed towards Jianqin with a powerful might. Jianqin wasn't stupid enough to go head-to-head with a king armament, so he dodged the king armament's attack with ease. The light wind sword was wrapped in a layer of purple and green sword chi, and it turned into a silver bolt of lightning as it pierced towards Jie Wukong. The barrier was unable to stop the light wind sword's advance and was silently pierced through. The light wind sword was like a hot knife through butter as it pierced towards Jie Wukong. Seeing that his barrier was unable to withstand a single blow, Jie Wukong's forehead began to sweat profusely. His face became pale as he quickly retreated and used his king weapon to block in front of him. Ding! The light wind sword pierced through the king weapon, but the sword chi was unable to do anything to it. The king weapon was too strong and was not something that the sword chi of the current stage could harm. At this time, the flames on the king weapon surged and a powerful force was reflected back at Jie Wukong. Jianqin groaned and uncontrollably retreated a few steps as the blood in his body began to boil. Jianqin was shocked. The king weapon was truly worthy of being a weapon left behind by a Saint King expert. Just the rebounding force was enough to cause him to be unable to withstand it. Go to hell! Jie Wukong took advantage of the time when Jianqin was retreating and quickly stabbed towards Jianqin with his king weapon. Jianqin's body was like a ghost as he nimbly dodged Jie Wukong's attacks. The light wind sword was accompanied by the sword chi of the purple and green sword chi as it continuously stabbed towards Jie Wukong. The sword chi was so dense that it was difficult to determine which one was the real one. Jie Wukong was forced into a panic by Jianqin's attack. He immediately retracted his king weapon and began to wave it in front of him in an attempt to find the real body of the light wind sword. Then he would use the king weapon's strength to directly injure Jianqin. However, Jie Wukong was only able to hold on for a short while before his movements came to an abrupt halt. He didn't know when Jianqin had appeared behind Jie Wukong, but the light wind sword had broken through his barrier and pierced right through his throat, piercing right through. This time, everyone present was once again dumbfounded. They did not think that Jianqin, who had just killed Jie Wukong, would only need a few breaths of time to kill Jie Wukong, who was also protected by a barrier and wielding a king weapon. Du Gufeng's face became very ugly. He immediately stomped on the ground and shot out of the cave. He already knew that he had offended Jianqin. If he continued to stay, it would be hard to avoid a fierce battle. With Jianqin's strength, he did not have the confidence to win. Jianqin quickly took the king weapon from Jie Wukong's hand and stored it in his own interspatial ring. He then took the interspatial ring from Jie Wukong's hand and immediately chased after Du Gufeng. Du Gufeng had the heaven tier battle skill in his possession. If he escaped, then it would be very difficult for Jianqin to complete the heaven tier battle skill. Sensing Jianqin chasing after him, Du Gufeng immediately shouted, "Help me stop him!" Immediately, four middle-aged men stepped forward to block Jianqin's path. Each of them had a powerful aura, and the one in the lead was a middle-aged man wearing a purple robe. Jianqin's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. His speed did not decrease in the slightest, and his light wind sword carried a purple and green sword chi as it attacked the four middle-aged men. The four of them did not know the power of the purple and green sword chi, so they all took out their saint weapons to block. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sound of the four weapons colliding, the light wind sword had already collided with the four saint weapons. The four saint weapons were immediately cut open by the purple and green sword chi. With the saint weapons damaged, the four middle-aged men were also implicated. They groaned one after another, and their faces immediately became somewhat pale. "While you're sick, I'll take your life." Jianchen was anxious for Dugu Feng to escape, so he directly attacked with all his strength. His strength as a first cycle Earth Saint Master was displayed to the extreme. In a flash of silver light, the light wind sword stabbed out 4 times. The 3 of them were unable to dodge in time, and their throats were pierced. Only the strongest of the 4, the purple-robed middle-aged man, was able to use his weapon to block Genshin's attack. Immediately, another hole appeared on his greatsword. After his saint weapon was damaged twice, the middle-aged man's mouth began to bleed. He looked at Genshin with eyes filled with shock. Chapter 318. Those who were still in the passageway stared at Genshin in shock. The snatching of the heaven-class battle skill had only happened in a short period of time. Those who had not yet entered the cave did not know what had happened. At this moment, they were all confused by the scene of Genshin chasing after Dugu Feng. Wasn't everything fine just now? How did they start fighting so quickly? And the result was unacceptable. How did Genshin's strength suddenly become so strong? Genshin's figure disappeared into the passageway of the cave as he chased after Dugu Feng. Soon after, the subordinates of the experts woke up and quickly ran into the cave. Inside the cave, Shixiangran and Jetta Wukong were lying on the ground motionless. The blood that flowed out from their bodies had already gathered into a large pool of blood on the ground. Young Master Wukong! Suddenly, there was a cry of alarm, and 2 middle-aged men rushed towards Jed Wukong, who was lying on the ground. Looking at Jed Wukong, who had a big hole in his throat, their faces turned pale, and their eyes were filled with fear. Young Master Wukong! Young Master Wukong! One of the middle-aged men shook Jetta Wukong's body and shouted anxiously, trying to wake him up. Young Master Wukong is already dead. The other middle-aged man sighed with an indescribable sadness. Dead, how is this possible? Young Master Wukong had the protection of a barrier and a king weapon. Who could kill him here? The middle-aged man's emotions were somewhat unstable. Jetta Wukong's status in the Jetta family was very high. Not only was he the son of the current head of the family, he was also the future head of the Jetta family. The 2 of them and Jigu were members of the Jetta family and had come here to protect Jetta Wukong. Now that Jetta Wukong was dead, it would be difficult for them to survive. Sigh. The other middle-aged man also sighed. They did not show any sadness about Jetta Wukong's death. It was just that Jetta Wukong's status in the family was too high, and as his bodyguards, they would be severely punished. The head of the Jetta family might even kill them to accompany Jetta Wukong. Who killed young Master Wukong? The middle-aged man asked in a deep voice. His face was extremely gloomy. Now that Jetta Wukong was dead, he could not imagine how much responsibility he would have to bear. Perhaps when he left this place, he would not be able to continue living in this world. In this place, only that young man called Genshin had a grudge with our young master. Even Dugu Feng had just escaped, and the 4 strong bodyguards of the Dugu family were also killed by Genshin in a very short amount of time. The one who killed young Master Wukong is most likely Genshin. He really hit it well. The other middle-aged man sighed with a depressed expression. Miss Tianmu Ling, young Master Qinji, can you tell us if the one who killed young Master Wukong is Genshin? Tianmu Ling and Qinji both nodded at the same time. Their faces were blank. The scene before them had a huge impact on their hearts. Genshin could actually break through the barrier left behind by a Saint King expert so easily. They knew how powerful the barrier was and found it hard to accept. After knowing who the killer was, the 2 middle-aged men fell silent. Genshin's strength was not something they could deal with. The 2 middle-aged men did not stay there. They carried Jetta Wukong's corpse and left the cave with depressed expressions. They were not stupid. In order to prevent Genshin from killing them, they could only take Jetta Wukong's corpse and leave this place while Genshin was not around. They could only wait until the end of the competition to report this matter to the elders, and hope that the head of the family would be lenient with them. It was impossible to escape. Instead, they would die even faster. The cave is up ahead. Let's go in quickly and let them deal with the purple gold thunder lion. Run, the cave is up ahead. Outside the cave, a group of people were running in the direction of the cave. Behind them, the mountain-like purple gold thunder lion was constantly chasing after them. It constantly spat out lightning from its mouth. Every strike was enough to burn a person to a crisp. On the ground, a golden, rat-like pangolin emperor cooperated with the purple gold thunder lion to attack the group of people. In this group of people, other than the two groups of Earth Saint Masters that had dealt with the purple gold thunder lion and the pangolin emperor, there were several hundred great Saint Masters. After the two teams with king weapons killed the two devil beasts and entered the cave, those great Saint Masters couldn't remain calm anymore. If you don't enter the tiger's den, how can you get the tiger cub? Many people understood the logic. For the sake of obtaining the treasures inside the cave, each and every one of them ran towards the cave without any regard for their lives. The actions of these great Saint Masters provoked the two Earth Saint Masters that were fighting with the magical beasts. As a result, the two groups of Earth Saint Masters that had suffered heavy casualties finally gave up on fighting with the magical beasts and rushed towards the cave. There were no powerful people that could keep the two magical beasts in check. In the end, the situation had developed to this point. The Earth Saint Masters that ran in front were naturally fine, but the great Saint Masters that fell behind became the targets of the two magical beasts. Suddenly, a figure flew over the group of people, bringing with it a gust of wind as it shot into the distance at an extremely fast speed. Although many people noticed this figure, who would pay attention to it at this time? Not long after this figure disappeared, another figure flew over the group of people and chased in the direction that the first figure had disappeared. It was Jianqin and Dugofeng, one running and one chasing. Jianqin pushed his speed to the limit, using the trees on both sides as leverage. His entire body was 10 meters above the ground, and his speed was not the slightest bit slower than Dugofeng's. Bit by bit, he closed the distance between him and Dugofeng. Sensing that Jianqin was hot on his heels, Dugofeng's expression changed again. He was secretly shocked. Could it be that fifth uncle and the other three were all killed by Jianqin? No, that's impossible. With fifth uncle's strength as a fifth cycle Earth Saint Master, how could he be so weak? Although he felt that it was hard to believe, Dugofeng's estimation of Jianqin's strength had increased. To be able to ignore the existence of the barrier, easily kill Shi Xiangran and Jetta Wukong, two people with ruler armaments, and even deal with his fifth uncle, who was a fifth cycle Earth Saint Master and 3 third cycle Earth Saint Master guards in such a short amount of time. Such a glorious achievement was something that even Dugofeng, who wielded a ruler armament, could not achieve. Right now, in Dugofeng's heart, Jianqin had already become an undefeatable existence. His speed actually increased again. He had to protect his ruler armament. He, Dugofeng, was not a cowardly person who feared death, but in order to protect his ruler armament and prevent it from falling into the hands of outsiders, he could only choose to run away. A ruler armament was extremely important to every large clan. It would directly affect the overall strength and status of the clan. He, Dugofeng, would not allow a ruler armament to be lost in his hands. Otherwise, he would be a sinner of the clan. Even if he died, he would not be able to rest in peace. The two of them pushed their speed to the limit. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they crossed a distance of several dozen kilometers. They passed through the forest and ran on a plain. Now the distance between Jianqin and Dugofeng was slowly closing. The distance between them had shrunk from 3 kilometers to 1 kilometer. Although Dugofeng did not possess wind-attributed Saint Force, the movement technique he used to escape was extremely profound. It made it difficult for Jianqin, who specialized in speed, to chase after him. At this moment, over 10 kilometers away from Jianqin, a black-clothed young man with waist-length hair walked step by step towards the faintly discernible forest. The young man seemed to be around 27 or 28 years old. He had a calm temperament and a resolute expression. I wonder if the cave left behind by the predecessors is true or not. There's actually a heaven-tier battle skill. I heard that even the so-called 5 great experts have all hurried over. Whatever, I'll go take a look as well. Hopefully I can find him, the black-clothed young man mumbled to himself. At this moment, 2 figures appeared before the young man's eyes a few kilometers away. They quickly rushed towards the black-clothed young man. Looking at the 2 people rushing towards him, a sliver of disdain appeared on the young man's face. He mumbled to himself, "Another 2 people have come to die. I hope they're not too weak. Let me properly test out my current strength." As soon as the young man finished speaking, his face changed slightly. He stared at the 2 people in a daze as a sliver of surprise gradually appeared in his eyes. Am I seeing things? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? The black-clothed young man mumbled to himself before rubbing his eyes hard. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the 2 people in front of him. In the next moment, the black-clothed young man immediately became overjoyed. He quickly rushed towards the 2 people. "Friends in front, please help me stop the person behind me. The Dugu clan will definitely reward you greatly." As long as he could protect the ruler armament, Dugu Feng had already given up on his dignity and pride. If the ruler armament was not in his hands, he would have chosen to fight to the death with Jianqin even if he knew he was not his opponent. However, in order to protect the ruler armament from falling into the hands of outsiders, Dugu Feng had no choice but to do this. Hearing Dugu Feng's words, the black-clothed young man was slightly stunned. He then revealed a deep smile before moving. Powerful, wind-attributed saint force erupted from his body and wrapped around the black-clothed young man. Like a released arrow, he charged over at a speed several times faster than Dugu Feng and Jianqin. The black-clothed young man's speed was unbelievably fast. In less than a breath's time, he had crossed several kilometers, shocking both Jianqin and Dugu Feng. However, when Jianqin saw the black-clothed young man's appearance, he immediately became stunned before becoming excited. After Dugu Feng recovered from his shock, he was overjoyed. He never thought that his luck would be so good to actually run into such a powerful person. With the speed the young man had displayed, even if he could not defeat Jianqin, it would not be a problem for him to hold him back for a while. "Friend, please help me stop the person behind me. My Dugu clan will definitely reward you greatly." Dugu Feng called out for help once again, but his heart had become much more relaxed. The black-clothed young man revealed a strange smile. He did not answer Dugu Feng's question, and instead, a faint azure sword appeared in his hand. Under Dugu Feng's shocked gaze, the sword swept towards him with lightning-like speed. Dugu Feng immediately used his ruler armament to block in front of him. With a loud bang, the black-clothed young man staggered back a few steps. Every step he took left a deep footprint in the ground. What was even more shocking was that even with his ruler armament, Dugu Feng was actually forced back 3 steps by the young man's seemingly ordinary attack. "Friend, what is the meaning of this?" Dugu Feng's face immediately became gloomy, and he was faintly shocked. The black-clothed young man's strength was a little too abnormal. Even with his ruler armament blocking his attack, his internal organs had actually been shaken up. Don't tell me that this ordinary-looking young man who is about the same age as me is actually a heaven saint master? Dugu Feng thought to himself in shock. The black-clothed young man retreated 5 steps before stabilizing himself. He looked at the huge sword in Dugu Feng's hand with a shocked expression and cursed. "Fuck, it's actually a ruler armament." With Dugu Feng blocked by the black-clothed young man, Jianqin finally caught up. He stopped 20 meters behind Dugu Feng and was in no hurry to attack. Instead, he stared at the black-clothed young man in front of him with a smile. The black-clothed young man's gaze landed on Jianqin and immediately revealed a happy expression. He waved his hand at Gentian and smiled. "Hey, Gentian, I never thought that we would meet in such a way. You've done pretty well. You've actually managed to chase someone with a ruler armament into such a sorry state." Gentian also revealed a happy smile and said, "Ming Dong, it's been a year since we last met. I almost couldn't recognize you." The black-clothed young man was Ming Dong, who had stayed in the floating god hall. After a year, his strength had undergone an earth-shattering change.